Hello and welcome. You're watching Pika Fiction. In this video, we present to you what if Ash was protected by a humanoid Mewtwo who claimed him as her only master and lover. If stories like this brighten your day, consider subscribing and hitting the like button. It really helps the channel grow. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. Chapter 1, The Claiming the Athorn Valley had gone quiet in the wrong way. Ash noticed it about 2 hours into his hike, somewhere between the third switchback and the ridge where the old ranger station used to be. The birdsong had stopped. Not faded, stopped, like someone had reached into the air and pulled the sound out by its roots. No Pidgey calls echoing off the canyon walls. No Rattata rustling through the underbrush. Even the wind had died to nothing, leaving the trees standing like painted scenery, still and fake-looking in the flat afternoon light. Pikachu's ears went stiff on his shoulder. "Yeah," Ash murmured. "I feel it too." He'd been walking since dawn, following a GPS coordinate Professor Oak had sent him 3 days ago along with a message that read, "Energy anomaly detected in Athorn Valley. Readings don't match any known Pokémon signature. Be careful, and bring equipment." The equipment was in his pack. A spectral analyzer, an aura reader that Lucario had sniffed at dismissively, and a handful of sensor nodes he was supposed to plant at the epicenter. Simple enough. Walk in, plant sensors, walk out. Oak had even apologized for the boring assignment. Ash stopped on the trail and crouched, pressing his palm flat against the dirt. Cool. Dry. But underneath, something hummed, a vibration too low to hear, felt only through bone and instinct. Like the earth itself was holding its breath. Pika. Pikachu's cheeks sparked, tiny arcs of electricity dancing between the red patches. Warning behavior. Not playful sparks, the real thing. "I know, buddy." Ash stood, scanning the tree line. The valley was narrow here, steep granite walls rising on either side, choked with pine and shadow. Good ambush terrain. 19 years old, the fangs. They looked old in a way that went beyond weathering. Old like they'd been here before the valley existed, before the mountains pushed up around them, and the world had simply grown over them like skin over a splinter. There were markings on the stone. Ash moved closer, squinting. Not carved, grown into the rock, like mineral veins that had decided to form patterns. Spirals, lines, shapes that almost resolved into something recognizable before sliding away from comprehension. And at the base of the nearest pillar, a crack. Recent. The edges were sharp, the exposed stone inside lighter than the weathered surface. Something dark wisped from the crack. Not smoke, thinner than smoke, more like heat shimmer given color. It rose a few inches and dissipated. "Well," Ash said quietly, pulling the sensor nodes from his pack. "That's not ominous at all." He planted the first node 6 meters from the formation and activated it. The device chirped, its small screen flooding with data he'd let Oak interpret. Second node went on the opposite side. He was reaching for the third when Pikachu screamed. Not a battle cry. A warning. Ash dropped flat on instinct alone, and the hyper beam carved through the air where his head had been half a second earlier. It hit the far tree line and detonated, turning 3 pines into splinters and fire. The shockwave rolled over him, hot and full of debris, and before the sound had finished he was rolling sideways, hand finding Charizard's ball. "Charizard, I need a second beam." This one hit the ground 2 meters to his right, and the concussion threw him. He hit dirt, slid, tasted blood where he'd bitten his tongue. Pikachu leaped off his shoulder and landed in a combat stance, cheeks blazing. Ash got his bearings in the time it took to breathe twice. 12. He counted 12 figures emerging from the tree line in a coordinated spread, 6 from each side, closing like jaws. They moved in pairs, 1 human, 1 Pokémon, and they moved like people who'd done this before. Black tactical gear, not the white jumpsuits of rocket grunts. Helmets with full face shields. Chest rigs loaded with equipment he didn't recognize. Professional. The Pokémon were worse. An alakazam at the front, but its eyes were wrong, too bright, pupils dilated to nothing, psychic energy seeping from them like tears. An augmented Houndoom with metal plating fused to its skull and spine. A Scizor whose claws hummed with an energy field that wasn't any move Ash had ever seen. Ash released Charizard. The fire type materialized with a roar that shook the clearing, wings flaring, flame already building in his throat. But the moment Charizard appeared, two of the operatives raised devices that looked like oversized tuning forks and activated them. A high-pitched whine cut through the air. Charizard flinched, his flame guttering. Pikachu staggered, ears flat. Sonic disruptors. Military grade. Ash had heard about these, prototypes designed to destabilize a Pokémon's ability to concentrate on move execution. They'd never been approved for civilian use. Who are you? Ash called out, buying time, assessing. 12 operatives, 6 augmented Pokémon, sonic disruptors, coordinated deployment. This wasn't a mugging. This was a military operation. One of the operatives stepped forward. Taller than the others, broader in the shoulders, moving with the easy confidence of someone who'd never lost a fight that mattered. When the figure pulled off the helmet, Ash saw a woman, mid-30s, sharp-featured, dark hair buzzed short, a scar running from her left temple to her jaw. Ash Ketchum. She said his name like she was confirming a delivery. My name is Agent Sable. We're not here for you. Funny way of showing it. The hyper beam was a ranging shot. If we wanted you dead, you'd be dead. She said it without malice, without pleasure. Just fact. We're here for your ghost. Ash kept his face still, but his mind raced. My what? Sable tilted her head, studying him. You really don't know, do you? Interesting. She gestured, and her operatives tightened the perimeter. The alakazam's eyes pulsed brighter. For the past 4 years, something has been following you. Shadowing your movements across 6 regions. Intervening in situations you never knew were dangerous. We've been tracking its psychic signature for 18 months, and every time we get close, it vanishes. But it always comes back to you. Ash said nothing. His hand was on his belt. Charizard was struggling against the sonic field but staying upright, a growl building in his chest that Ash could feel through the ground. So here's what happens, Sable continued. You're the bait, Mr. Ketchum. And you've been incredibly cooperative, walking out here alone to a nice isolated location. When the ghost shows up to protect its precious trainer, she raised a hand. The operatives revealed what they'd been setting up while she talked, a ring of pylons, already planted in the ground around the clearing, each one thrumming with a pale blue light. We contain it. Psychic suppression field. Ash recognized the principle from his time training with Sabrina in Saffron City. Create a zone where psychic energy couldn't flow properly, and any psychic type caught inside would be crippled. You went through a lot of trouble, Ash said. It's a lot of ghost. And if I don't cooperate? Sable's expression didn't change. Then we take you into protective custody and wait. The ghost always comes. Whether you're willing or unconscious makes no difference to us. Pikachu snarled, electricity arcing between his cheeks in jagged bolts. Ash made his decision in the span of a heartbeat. Not because he understood what was happening, he didn't. Not because he had a plan, he was outnumbered and outgunned. He made it because 12 strangers had just told him they intended to use him as bait to trap something that, apparently, had been protecting him for years. And Ash Ketchum had never once in his life been comfortable with someone else getting hurt on his account. Pikachu, thunderbolt the pylon on the left. Charizard, flamethrower, scatter formation. Pikachu moved like bottled lightning, a yellow blur crossing the distance to the nearest pylon in less than a second, electricity already concentrated into a focused blast that hit the device dead center. The pylon shattered. The suppression field flickered. Charizard roared and unleashed a sweeping flamethrower that forced 3 operatives to dive for cover, their augmented Houndoom lunging forward to absorb the flames with flash fire. Sable didn't flinch. Predicted. Theta Protocol. The Alakazam raised both spoons. The world lurched. Ash felt it in his skull, a psychic pressure wave that wasn't an attack so much as a declaration. His vision doubled. Pikachu stumbled mid-stride, losing the Thunderbolt's charge. Charizard bellowed in confusion, flame going wild. The Scizor came in fast, too fast, boosted by whatever technology was woven into its metal plating. Bullet Punch, aimed at Pikachu. Ash threw himself sideways, scooping Pikachu off the ground and taking the hit across his upper back instead. The impact was like getting kicked by a Tauros. He went down hard, Pikachu clutched against his chest, the air driven out of him in a single explosive grunt. Pain bloomed across his shoulder blade, deep, grinding, the kind that meant something was cracked if not broken. He rolled onto his side, gasping. Blood ran hot down his back. Charizard roared in fury and charged the Scizor, but 2 more operatives hit him with converging sonic blasts, and the fire-type crashed to one knee, wings shuddering. Sable walked toward Ash with measured steps. "Return your Pokémon, Mr. Ketchum. You're making this harder than it needs to be." Ash got to one knee. His vision was swimming. Pikachu was sparking weakly in his arms, stunned by the psychic wave but fighting it. "Go to hell," Ash said. Sable sighed. She made a hand signal. 2 operatives raised weapons, not lethal, Ash could see the stun charges, and aimed at him. The message was clear. Conscious or unconscious, willing or not. That was when the air changed. It wasn't dramatic at first. Just a shift in pressure, like ears popping during a rapid altitude change. The temperature dropped 3 degrees in the span of a breath. Then 5 more. The operative nearest to Ash exhaled, and his breath came out as fog. Sable's hand went to her earpiece. "Perimeter, report." Static. "Perimeter." Nothing. She turned to her Alakazam. The psychic type was trembling. Not from cold. It was afraid. Its spoons were rattling against each other like teeth chattering. The suppression pylons, the ones still standing, began to spark. Not malfunction sparking. They were being overwhelmed. Too much psychic energy flooding into the field, more than they were designed to absorb, and the excess was bleeding out as electrical discharge. One by one, they overloaded and blew, each detonation marked by a sharp crack and a burst of blue-white light. Sable drew her sidearm. "All units, defensive formation. It's here." Behind Ash, the air tore open. There was no other word for it. Reality developed a seam, a vertical line of blinding violet light, 2 meters tall, that split wider with a sound like silk ripping. Through the gap came something that didn't belong in the world as Ash understood it. She stepped through the tear like she was walking through a doorway. Tall. Almost 6 feet, with proportions that were close to human but subtly, unsettlingly off, limbs too long, joints too precise, movements that flowed without the tiny imperfections of human locomotion. Her skin was pale lavender, smooth and faintly luminous in the fading daylight. White hair fell past her shoulders, moving independently of any wind, stirred by currents of energy that rippled around her like heat haze. Her eyes were violet, not the blue-violet of human variation but true, deep violet, the color of the space between stars, with pupils that contracted to slits as she surveyed the clearing. She wore no clothing in any human sense, but she wasn't exposed, her body was covered in what appeared to be a second skin of psychic energy, form-fitting and shifting, darker purple along her torso and limbs, lighter at her extremities. A tail, slender, muscular, the same lavender as her skin, curved behind her with slow, deliberate movements. She looked at Ash on the ground, bleeding, Pikachu clutched against his chest. Her expression didn't change. It didn't need to. The temperature in the clearing dropped another 10 degrees. The Alakazam made a sound, a whimper, high and desperate, and teleported away, abandoning its trainer without a backward glance. Agent Sable, to her credit, didn't run. She raised her sidearm and fired. The stun round stopped in midair, 6 inches from the woman's face. It hung there, rotating slowly, crackling with its contained charge. The woman didn't look at it. She was still looking at Ash. Then she raised one hand, palm open, fingers spread. What happened next was not a battle. Sable's sidearm crumpled like tinfoil, not knocked away, compressed, the metal folding in on itself with a shriek of tortured alloy until it was a fist-sized ball of junk. Sable dropped it with a hiss of pain as the collapsing metal superheated. The sonic disruptors went next. Every one of them, simultaneously. They bent, twisted, and shattered, the sound of breaking technology ringing across the clearing like discordant bells. Charizard surged to his feet, freed from the debilitating whine, and roared. The operatives opened fire, everything they had. Stun rounds, net launchers, a Houndoom's flamethrower, the Sizer's flash cannon. All of it stopped. Not deflected. Not blocked. Stopped, held in place by invisible force, a frozen constellation of projectiles and energy beams suspended in the air around a woman like ornaments. She closed her hand. Everything reversed. The stun rounds snapped back toward their shooters, the flamethrower curved in a perfect arc back at the Houndoom, the flash cannon reflected into the Sizer's own face. Operatives flew backward, slamming into trees and rocks with controlled force, enough to break bones, not enough to kill. Precise. Calculated. Deliberate. In 4 seconds, it was over. 11 operatives lay scattered across the clearing, groaning, clutching broken limbs and shattered equipment. Their Pokémon were down or fled. The Houndoom had taken its own flamethrower and collapsed, the augmented plating on its skull cracked and smoking. The Sizer was embedded 3 inches into a granite wall. Sable was the only one still standing. She was pinned, not physically, but held in place by psychic force, her boots grinding against the dirt as she tried to move and couldn't. Sweat ran down her face. Her jaw was clenched so hard Ash could see the muscles jumping. The woman walked past her without a glance. She crossed the clearing in strides that covered too much ground, each step eerily smooth, and knelt beside Ash. Up close, she was even more striking. Her features were angular but not harsh, high cheekbones, a narrow jaw, a mouth that seemed designed for precise speech rather than expression. The lavender of her skin was faintly translucent over her temples, and beneath it, Ash could see dim pulses of violet light, like a heartbeat made visible. She smelled like ozone and something else, something clean and wild, like the air after a thunderstorm over open water. She placed her hand on his wounded back. Warmth flooded through him, not the ordinary warmth of body heat but something deeper, cellular, a tingling wave that found the cracked bone and fixed it, found the torn muscle and knit it, found the blood and told it to stop flowing out of him. The pain didn't fade, it was simply removed, like a file deleted from a system. Ash gasped. His vision cleared. The fog of shock and adrenaline lifted, and he saw her with total clarity for the first time. She was looking at him with an intensity that would have been frightening if it weren't so nakedly raw. Her violet eyes searched his face with the desperate focus of someone seeing something they'd been watching from a distance for years, finally close enough to touch. "You are mine," she said. Her voice was low, resonant, with harmonics that vibrated somewhere behind Ash's sternum. Not quite human. Not quite anything else. But clear, precise, and absolutely certain. "I am yours. I will not allow you to die." She paused. Something flickered behind those alien eyes, uncertainty, need, a vulnerability so deep it seemed to surprise even her. "This is not a request." Ash stared at her. His heart was hammering, and he knew she could feel it, could probably count the beats from across the valley. Pikachu was still in his arms, staring up at the woman with wide eyes and flat ears, electricity crackling but held in check by some instinct that recognized this being was not an enemy. Ash knew her. Not her form, he'd never seen anything like this body, this face, this impossible fusion of human and Pokemon. But the psychic signature that radiated from her like heat from a star, that, he knew. He'd felt it once before, years ago, on an island in the middle of a storm, when the world had gone sideways and he'd walked between two warring gods and paid for it with 30 seconds of death. Mewtwo. Something happened to her face. The clinical mask cracked, just barely, at the corners of her mouth and the edges of her eyes. A fracture in porcelain. Her hand, still pressed against his healed back, trembled. "You remember," she said. Not a question. But her voice cracked on it, just barely, and Ash heard everything she wasn't saying in that tiny, catastrophic imperfection. "Yeah." He swallowed. "Hard to forget." Behind them, Sable made a strangled sound. "Ketchum, you need to listen to me." "That thing is," Mewtwo turned her head. Just that. Turned her head and looked at Sable. The agent went silent mid-word, mouth still open, eyes bulging. Not from psychic force, from pure, primal terror. The survival instinct that lived in the lizard brain of every creature that had ever looked into the eyes of an apex predator and understood, on a cellular level, that it was prey. "You used him as bait," Mewtwo said. Her voice was perfectly calm. "You injured him. You were going to take him." Each sentence was delivered with the cadence of a judge reading charges. Sable tried to speak. Nothing came out. "I am going to release you," Mewtwo continued. "You will take your broken soldiers and your broken machines, and you will leave this valley. You will not return. You will not approach him again. If I sense any of your people within 10 kilometers of Ash Ketchum at any point in the future, I will not be this generous again." She released the hold. Sable staggered, caught herself, and for one terrible second Ash thought the woman was going to do something brave and stupid. But Sable was a professional, and professionals understood odds. She looked at her scattered team, at the shattered pylons, at the woman kneeling in the dirt who had dismantled a 12-person tactical squad without taking a step. Sable ran the math. The math was not encouraging. "All units, fall back," she said hoarsely. "Evac protocol, now." It took them 8 minutes to collect their wounded and withdraw. Mewtwo watched every second of it, standing between them and Ash like a wall made of contempt. When the last operative disappeared into the tree line, she turned back to him. Ash had gotten to his feet. His back was healed, his head was clear, and he had approximately 1,000 questions fighting for priority. "You've been following me," he said. "For years." "Yes." "You've been protecting me." "Yes." "Without telling me." "You did not need to know." "I didn't." He stopped. Took a breath. Pikachu climbed back onto his shoulder, watching Mewtwo with cautious, sparking alertness. "You're going to have to give me more than that." Mewtwo regarded him. In the fading light, the bioluminescent patterns beneath her skin pulsed slowly, violet, blue, violet, like a heartbeat made visible. She seemed to be weighing something internally, calculating the cost of honesty. "Walk with me," she said. "This clearing will attract attention. I will explain what I choose to explain." Ash almost laughed. "What I choose to explain." God, she was something. "Fine," he said. "But we're walking toward town, not deeper into the wilderness. I'm done being in the middle of nowhere tonight." Something almost imperceptible shifted in her expression. If Ash had to name it, he'd call it surprise, the mild, intrigued surprise of someone who'd expected to be obeyed without question and had instead been given a condition. "Acceptable," she said. They walked. The forest around them was still silent, but it felt different now, not the held-breath emptiness of before, but the wary quiet of a place that knew something powerful was passing through and had decided to stay very, very still until it left. Mewtwo moved through the underbrush without disturbing it. Not carefully, she simply didn't seem to touch the ground the same way a physical being did. Her feet made contact with the earth, but the leaves didn't crunch, the twigs didn't snap. Ash found himself watching her from the corner of his eye, trying to reconcile the towering, alien psychic he'd encountered on New Island with this woman, walking beside him in the twilight, her tail swaying in slow arcs behind her. "Your form," he said. "This isn't what you looked like before." "No." She didn't look at him. "I was remade." "By who?" "The woman who designed my second body. Dr. Ilara Voss. She was part of a project called Ascension, funded by the man you know as Giovanni, executed by a team of geneticists who understood the boundary between human and Pokémon DNA well enough to blur it." "Blur it how?" "I am not a Pokémon wearing human shape, Ash. I am both. My cellular structure integrates human genetic material at a fundamental level. I think as humans think. I feel as humans feel. But I wield power that no human body could contain." She paused. "They made me to be the perfect infiltrator. A weapon that could walk among humans undetected, gather intelligence, and destroy targets with psychic force no existing Pokémon could match. And you escaped. I destroyed the laboratory, killed 7 of the researchers, and erased the memories of the rest." She said it flatly, without guilt or satisfaction. "Then I disappeared." Ash processed that. 7 dead. He didn't flinch from it. He'd learned years ago that the world of Pokémon was not the sanitized adventure the League marketing department liked to present. Things died. People died. The question was always why. "And then you found me. I had been aware of you since New Island. When you stepped between the attacks, when you died to stop the fighting," her voice hitched. "Just once, just barely. No one had ever done anything like that for me. No one had ever considered my existence worth that price. I wasn't trying to, I know. You were trying to stop the violence. You were trying to protect everyone. That is precisely why." She finally looked at him. The violet of her eyes was deep enough to drown in. "You saw 2 beings destroying each other and decided, with no power, no ability to survive, that you would stand between them anyway. Because it was right. Not because it was strategic. Not because you had something to gain. Because your heart would not let you do anything else." Ash didn't have an answer for that. He remembered the moment, the blinding light, the impact, the strange floating darkness, the tears, but he'd never examined it the way she was describing it. He'd just done it. "So I watched you," she continued. "From a distance. For years. I watched you grow from a reckless child into," she stopped walking. Turned to face him fully. "This." Ash met her gaze. "Into what?" "Someone worth protecting." The weight of the statement settled between them. Pikachu made a small sound on Ash's shoulder, not a warning, something softer. "Understanding, maybe." "You deflected threats I never knew about," Ash said, remembering what Sable had implied. 3 assassination attempts. A rocket cell in Hoenn that intended to kidnap you and use you as leverage against Lance. A rogue psychic in Unova who was hunting trainers with unusually strong bonds to their Pokémon. She listed them like items on a grocery list. I handled each one. You were never aware. You erased memories. When necessary. He struggled with it. Not the protection. The violation. The idea that people's minds had been altered without consent, even if those people were threats. That's a lot of power to use without anyone's permission. I require no one's permission. She said it without arrogance, just clarity. I am the most powerful psychic entity on this planet. I answer to no authority, no government, no league. I answer only to myself. A pause. And now, to you. I didn't ask for that. No. You would not. That is also why. They stood there, facing each other on a forest trail in the growing dark, and Ash felt the world tilt slightly on its axis. Not from psychic force. From the realization that this impossibly powerful being, this woman who could crush a mountain with a thought, had chosen him. Not because he was strong. Not because he was useful. Because 8 years ago, a stupid brave kid had thrown himself into the crossfire and, "You are building a combustion source from raw materials," she observed. "I'm making a campfire. I could provide thermal energy directly. It would be more efficient. It would also be weird." He arranged the kindling, struck his fire steel, and blew gently on the spark until it caught. The flame grew, crackling and warm, casting orange light across the overhang. "Sit down. I'm making soup." She stared at him for a long moment, as if he'd said something in a language she didn't speak. Then, with the careful deliberation of someone who'd never done it before, she sat. Cross-legged, back straight, tail curled around her hip. She looked profoundly uncomfortable. "I do not require food," she said. "I sustain my cellular functions through direct conversion of psychic energy into." "That's great. You're eating soup." "I do not, soup, Mewtwo." She went quiet. Pikachu, already settled near the fire, made a sound that was suspiciously close to a laugh. Ash cooked. It was simple: dried noodles, seasoning packets, water from his canteen, heated in a collapsible pot over the fire. The kind of meal he'd made on hundreds of nights in hundreds of places, so routine his hands did it without his brain needing to participate. The familiarity of it grounded him. Normalcy in the face of the deeply abnormal. When the soup was ready, he poured 2 portions and handed one to Mewtwo. She took the cup in both hands. Her fingers were longer than human fingers, an extra joint lending them an elegant, unsettling articulation, and looked into it with the expression of a scientist examining a specimen. "It is broth. With processed wheat strands. It's chicken noodle soup. Drink it." She raised the cup to her lips. Sipped. Paused. "Well?" Ash asked. "The sodium content is excessive." Another sip. "The flavor profile is unsophisticated." Another. "I fail to understand why humans find this." She stopped. Looked into the cup. Took a longer drink. Ash bit the inside of his cheek to keep from smiling. "You were saying." "It is adequate," she said stiffly, and drank the rest without stopping. He gave her seconds without comment. She accepted without acknowledgement. They sat by the fire, eating, and for a few minutes it was almost peaceful, 2 people sharing a meal in the wilderness, if you ignored that one of them was a gene-spliced psychic demigod with lavender skin and a tail. "Can I ask you something?" Ash said. "You have been asking me things continuously since we began walking." "One more." She inclined her head. "The people who made you, the ones you killed. Do you regret it?" It was a dangerous question. He knew that. But he needed to know where her lines were, what kind of person existed beneath the power and the possessiveness and the clinical precision. Mewtwo stared into the fire. The light played across her features, softening the alien angles, making her look almost human. "Almost." 3 of them begged, she said quietly. 2 tried to fight. 1 prayed to a god I do not believe in. 1 simply stood there and waited. She paused. "I regret that it was necessary. I do not regret that I survived." Ash nodded slowly. "And if it happened again? If someone came after you? I would do what was required to protect myself." Her gaze shifted to him. "And to protect you. Without hesitation. Without limit. Even if I asked you not to. You would not ask me to let you die. I might ask you not to kill." She considered this. Actually considered it, not dismissing it, not deflecting, but turning it over in her mind with genuine thought. "That," she said finally, "would be difficult. But I would hear you." It wasn't a promise. But it was an opening, and Ash recognized it for what it was, a concession from someone who'd never conceded anything to anyone. He let it stand. Pikachu had fallen asleep by the fire, curled into a ball with his tail wrapped around his nose. The night was deep now, stars scattered across the gap of sky visible between the canyon walls. Mewtwo hadn't moved from her cross-legged position, but some of the rigidity had left her posture. She looked less like a weapon at rest and more like a person trying to remember what relaxation felt like. "You should sleep," she said. "Your body requires it." "What about you?" "I do not sleep. Ever. Sleep requires a cessation of vigilance. I have never been in a situation where I could afford that." The words landed quietly, and Ash let them sit for a moment. Never safe enough to close her eyes. Not once, in her entire existence. He wanted to say something about that, something that would acknowledge the enormity of it without making her feel pitted, because he sensed instinctively that pity from him would be the one thing she couldn't bear. "Well," he said, lying back on his bedroll and lacing his fingers behind his head. "You're with me now. And I'm with you. So maybe tonight's different." She looked at him. The fire caught in her violet eyes and turned them to jewels. "Perhaps," she said, so quietly he almost missed it. He closed his eyes. Sleep came faster than expected, pulled down by exhaustion and the strange, electric comfort of her presence. The last thing he registered before unconsciousness took him was a sensation like a warm hand resting on the edge of his awareness, not intrusive, not controlling. Just there. Watching over him. He dreamed of New Island. Of light and tears and the moment between death and waking when something had reached into the dark and refused to let him go. The sound of impact woke him. Ash's eyes snapped open. The fire had burned to embers. Pikachu was on his feet, crackling with electricity, facing the darkness beyond the overhang. Mewtwo was already standing, her body limned in violet light, her expression blank and terrible. Something was crashing through the forest toward them. Not running, destroying. Trees were being torn aside, the sound of splintering wood and grinding rock building like an approaching avalanche. The ground shook with each impact. "What is it?" Ash asked, already on his feet, hand on his belt. Mewtwo's eyes narrowed. "Familiar," she said, and there was something in her voice that Ash hadn't heard before. Cold recognition. "Get behind me." "I'm not, Ash." The way she said his name, not commanding, not requesting, but needing, stopped him. He stepped back. Not behind her, but beside her. She noticed. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't argue. The thing burst from the tree-line. It had been human once. Or it had been Pokemon once. Now it was both and neither, a hulking, tortured fusion of flesh and muscle standing 8 feet tall, its body a nightmare of human and Macamp anatomy welded together without concern for symmetry or sanity. 4 arms, 2 human-proportioned and 2 massive, bulging with gray-skinned muscle. A face that was caught between species, features sliding between human and Pokemon like a channel that couldn't find its signal. It was screaming, a constant, keening howl of pain and rage that wasn't words in any language but communicated everything words could not. Subject Theta. Mewtwo moved. She hit the creature with a psychic blast that should have ended the fight, concentrated telekinetic force designed to crush, immobilize, destroy. It struck Theta full in the chest and the creature staggered but didn't fall. It shook its head, howling louder, and charged. "It's shielded," Mewtwo said, surprise bleeding through her control. "Psychic-resistant genetic modification. She designed it to fight me." Theta closed the distance with terrifying speed. Mewtwo caught it with telekinesis, held it, and it pushed through. Not easily, not quickly, but with agonizing, grinding determination, its modified muscles flexing against invisible force, its 4 arms reaching for her. Mewtwo had to dodge. She flickered, teleporting 3 meters to the left in an instant, and Theta's fist cratered the ground where she'd been standing. The shockwave knocked Ash off his feet. Charizard. Lucario. Ash released both in rapid succession. Charizard erupted into the air, illuminating the battle with the fire building in his jaws. Lucario materialized in a combat stance, aura sensors already reading the battlefield. Theta wasn't just resistant to psychic attacks, its body was engineered to endure. Charizard's flamethrower washed over it and the creature barely reacted, its skin dissipating heat in ways that shouldn't have been biologically possible. Lucario launched an aura sphere and Theta batted it aside with one massive arm. But Ash was watching. That was what he did, what made him dangerous in a way no amount of power could replicate. He watched, and he saw patterns. Theta's 4 arms didn't move the same way. The 2 massive ones were weapons, powerful but slow, committed to each swing. The 2 human-proportioned ones were faster but weaker, used for balance and defense. And when Theta used its upper arms to attack, its lower arms dropped to compensate for the weight shift, leaving its midsection exposed for a full second. Mewtwo, force it to swing with the upper arms. Lucario, when I call it, aura sphere to the center mass, not the chest, the solar plexus. Pikachu, get behind it and wait for an opening at the base of the skull. He didn't shout. He projected, clear, commanding, the voice of a trainer who'd fought beside his Pokémon in a dozen life-or-death situations and learned that panic was a luxury he couldn't afford. Mewtwo glanced at him. For a fraction of a second, something shifted in her expression, not surprise exactly, but reassessment. He was giving her tactical instructions. Her, the most powerful psychic being on the planet. And they were good instructions. She moved. Not with raw power this time but with precision, darting in close and striking at Theta's upper arms with focused psychic jabs, irritating, stinging, provoking. Theta roared and swung with its massive fists, exactly as Ash had predicted. Its lower arms dropped. Now. Lucario's aura sphere hit the exposed midsection like a cannon shot. Theta doubled over, its howl pitching into something shrill and agonized. Pikachu was already there, he'd circled behind using the chaos as cover, launched himself off a tree trunk, and drove a focused thunderbolt into the base of Theta's skull where the human and Pokémon neural structures were most poorly integrated. Theta convulsed. Its legs buckled. Mewtwo caught it with telekinesis as it fell, not attacking now, but holding, keeping the massive body from crashing down in a way that would cause more damage to itself. The creature thrashed weakly. Its howling subsided into ragged, choking breaths that sounded horribly like sobbing. Up close, in the firelight, Ash could see its eyes, one human, one Machamp, both filled with a terror and confusion that had nothing to do with the battle and everything to do with the simple horror of existing as something that was never meant to be. Mewtwo knelt beside it. Her face was unreadable, but her hands, pressed against Theta's heaving chest, were shaking. The creature looked at her. Its one human eye focused, and something like recognition flickered in its depths. It made a sound, not a word, not quite, but shaped like one. Shaped like sister. Mewtwo's breath caught. Theta's body was failing. Ash could see it, the genetic instability that had been held in check by whatever drugs and technology Voss used was unraveling in real time. Its skin was discoloring, its muscles twitching with involuntary contractions, the fusion of human and Pokémon DNA coming apart at the seams. Can you save it? Ash asked. Mewtwo's jaw tightened. No. The cellular degradation is too advanced. It was dying before it was sent here. Her voice hardened. Voss sent it knowing it would die. She wanted combat data. We were the test. Theta made another sound. Softer now. Its massive arms relaxed, the tension going out of them. Its smaller, human-like hand reached up, trembling, uncoordinated, and found Mewtwo's arm. Gripped it with fading strength. The sound it made was clear enough for Ash to understand. Thank you. Mewtwo held the creature as it died. She didn't look away. She didn't close her eyes. She bore witness to every second of its passing with the fierce, terrible attention of someone who understood exactly what it was to be a created thing that the world had no place for. When it was over, when Theta's body went still and its one human eye glazed and its grip on Mewtwo's arm went slack, the silence was absolute. Ash recalled his Pokémon. Pikachu climbed onto his shoulder and pressed against his neck, trembling slightly. Even Charizard had been subdued in the end, his flame dying to a low flicker as he watched the creature's final moments. Mewtwo stood. Her expression was controlled, locked down, but her hands were still shaking. "That was me," she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "That is what I was. What I would have been, if my genetic structure had been less stable. A thing in pain. A weapon used and discarded. Mewtwo, am I a monster, Ash?" The question hit the air between them like a stone dropped into still water. She wasn't performing vulnerability. She wasn't seeking comfort. She was asking, genuinely, desperately, staring at the body of something that shared her origin, whether the thing she was deserved to exist. Ash crossed the distance between them. He took her hand, her shaking, blood-flecked hand with its two long fingers and its faint lavender luminescence, and he held it. "You're not a monster," he said. "You're the person who held that thing while it died so it wouldn't be alone at the end. Monsters don't do that." She stared at him. The firelight caught the moisture in her eyes. She hadn't known she could cry, he realized. She hadn't known her modified tear ducts were functional. The tears that slid down her lavender cheeks were the first she'd ever shed, and they seemed to surprise her as much as his words. Something fundamental shifted in her expression. Not a dramatic transformation, nothing so crude. Just a settling, a realignment, as if a piece of her that had been held at a painful angle for her entire existence had finally found a position where it could rest. "You are a very unusual human," she said. "So I've been told." She looked down at their joined hands. Her fingers curled around his, careful, testing, as if she expected him to pull away. He didn't. "Your hand is warm," she observed. "Yeah. That's a hand thing." "I see." She didn't let go. Ash cleaned the wound on Mewtwo's arm while she sat perfectly still and pretended it didn't hurt. The injury was from Theta, a deep gash across her forearm where one of those massive fists had connected during the initial exchange. The blood was a darker shade of red than human blood, almost burgundy, and it clotted slower. "I told you," she said stiffly as he wrapped the bandage around it, "I can regenerate damaged tissue through psychic cellular manipulation. This is unnecessary." "Then why isn't it healing?" Silence. The kind that meant she didn't want to admit the answer. Psychic-resistant modifications, Ash guessed. Whatever Voss engineered into Theta affects psychic healing too. More silence. Confirmation. "So let me do this," he said, tying off the bandage with practiced knots. "And stop being difficult." "I am not being difficult. I am being accurate. You're being a pain in the ass." She blinked. Then, and he'd remember this for the rest of his life, she huffed. A short, sharp exhale through her nose that was, unmistakably, a laugh suppressed by sheer force of will. Her mouth twitched. "Your bedside manner is atrocious," she informed him. Never claimed otherwise. He finished the bandage and sat back. "There. Human medicine. Low-tech but effective." She examined his work. Turned her arm, testing the wrap. "It is adequate. High praise." Her mouth twitched again. She was fighting a smile with the same intensity she'd used to fight Theta, and losing just as gradually. The sight of it, this impossibly powerful being, this gene-spliced psychic goddess, struggling and failing to suppress a smile over a field-dressed bandage, did something to Ash's chest that had nothing to do with combat or crisis. "Oh," he thought. "That might be a problem." He pushed the thought aside. There were bigger things to deal with. But it lodged somewhere behind his ribs and refused to leave. In a facility 1,400 kilometers away, Dr. Alara Voss leaned back from her monitoring station and removed her glasses. The lenses were unnecessary, her vision was perfect, but she wore them out of habit, a remnant of the person she'd been before the work consumed her. Subject Theta, status, she said. Terminated, her assistant replied. He was pale. He was always pale these days. Biosigns flatlined 12 minutes ago. Combat data upload is complete. Excellent. Voss pulled up the data on her primary display. Streams of numbers, wave patterns, energy signatures, the language of creation, if you knew how to read it. She did. Better than anyone alive. The combat footage was secondary. She'd expected Theta to die, the subject's cellular half-life was 48 hours at best, and she'd sent it into the field at hour 36 specifically because a degrading subject would fight harder, more desperately, more revealingly. What she wanted was the interaction data. There. The moment when Ash Ketchum called out his tactical instructions and Mewtwo responded. The psychic resonance between them, invisible to the naked eye but screaming in the data, had spiked. Not by a small margin. The amplitude of Mewtwo's psychic output had increased by 16% in the 2 seconds following Ash's commands, and the frequency had shifted to align with his neural patterns. The bond amplified her. Not metaphorically. Literally, measurably, physically. His presence made her more. Voss stood and walked to the window. Beyond the glass, a laboratory floor stretched out, tanks, equipment, the infrastructure of creation. Shadows moved in the tanks. Shapes that were not quite human and not quite Pokemon floated in nutrient fluid, growing, waiting. That's the variable, she murmured. That's what I was missing. She turned to her assistant. Prepare the resonance amplification protocols. And get me everything we have on Ash Ketchum, psychological profile, battle history, bonding patterns with his Pokemon. Everything. Dr. Voss, the ethics board, is not equipped to evaluate what we're doing here, Thomas. We are not performing research. We are shepherding evolution. She smiled. It was a warm smile, genuine, the smile of a woman who loved her work the way a painter loves her canvas. That was what made it terrifying. The boundary between human and Pokemon was never meant to be permanent. Mewtwo proves that. And now I understand how to bridge it for everyone. Thomas swallowed and turned back to his station. He did not look at the tanks. He had learned, months ago, to stop looking at the tanks. 200 kilometers east of the battle site, on a ridge overlooking the Athorn Valley, a man stood in the dark and watched. He was tall, lean, dressed in traveling clothes that could have belonged to any trainer on any road in any region, except for the blade at his hip, which glowed with a light that had nothing to do with electricity or fire. It was warm and golden and old, older than the mountains, older than the valley, older than the fossilized creatures buried in the stone beneath his feet. Kalen, the Arbiter, watched the last wisps of psychic energy from the battle dissipate into the night air. He watched the crack at the base of the fangs, wider now than it had been an hour ago. Dark energy seeped from it like blood from a wound, curling upward in tendrils that dissolved in the starlight but left an afterimage of wrong burned into the air. He'd felt the resonance spike. Everyone like him had. Across the world, the other arbiters, the chosen, the divine touched, the fragments of Arceus's will given human form, had felt the boundary tremble. The abomination had chosen a human. And the human had chosen her back. And the seal, the great and ancient seal that kept the primordial contained, the force that had existed before Arceus, before order, before the distinction between human and Pokemon meant anything at all, had trembled. Kalen drew his blade an inch from its sheath. The golden light spilled out, warm and sorrowful. Arceus, forgive me, he murmured, for what I must do. He sheathed the blade. Turned. Walked into the darkness. Behind him, the crack in the ancient stone widened another millimeter, and something beneath it stirred in a sleep that was growing less deep by the hour. Ash couldn't sleep after the fight with Theta. He lay on his bedroll, staring at the rock ceiling of the overhang, listening to the crackle of the rebuilt fire and the slow, steady rhythm of Mewtwo's breathing. She was sitting beside him, not sleeping, as she'd said, but resting with her eyes half closed and her hands folded in her lap. The firelight played across her features, turning her skin from lavender to something warmer, almost rose. She'd let her guard down. Not completely, he suspected that was physically impossible for her, but enough that the rigid tension in her shoulders had eased and the constant subtle movement of her psychic field had stilled to a gentle pulse. She looked, in that moment, less like a weapon and more like someone who was very, very tired. "Ask," she said without opening her eyes. "How'd you know I wanted to ask something?" Your heart rate elevated, and your breathing pattern changed to pre-speech cadence. Also, you are a deeply predictable person. He almost smiled. Fair enough. The name, Mewtwo. Do you like it? Her eyes opened. The question had genuinely caught her off guard. Like it? Yeah. Is it what you want to be called? Or is it just a designation? She was quiet for a long time. The fire popped. Pikachu snored softly. It is what I was called in the laboratory, she said. It is a classification. Mew-2. The second. The copy. The derivative. That's not a name. That's a serial number. I have never required a name. There is no one who addresses me with familiarity. There is now. She looked at him. That searching, intense look, the one that stripped away pretense and saw whatever was underneath. He met it without flinching. He was getting better at that. I do not know what name I would choose, she admitted. I have never considered it. Then think about it, he said. And when you decide, tell me. Until then, is it okay if I keep using Mewtwo? Yes, she said. Then, softer, no one has ever asked me what I wish to be called. First time for everything. She watched him settle back onto the bedroll. His eyes were heavy now, the adrenaline finally draining, exhaustion rushing in to fill the void. But before he let himself sleep, he reached out and found her hand again. Her fingers, cool, smooth, those strange extra-jointed digits, curled around his immediately, like a reflex she didn't know she had. Ash, she said. Yeah. The creature, Theta. When it died, it was not afraid. Because I was there. A pause. No one has ever done that for me either. Been present. Stayed. His grip tightened on her hand. I'm not going anywhere. She didn't answer. But her fingers intertwined with his, holding on with a gentleness that was more eloquent than any word she could have chosen. He slept. She watched over him. And in his dreams, the darkness was held at bay by a warm, violet light that never wavered. When dawn broke over the Athorn Valley, Ash woke to the smell of something burning and the sight of Mewtwo holding a pot over the fire with telekinesis, staring into it with the expression of a general who had just been outmaneuvered by an inferior opponent. What are you doing? He asked, sitting up. I am attempting to prepare the soup. She did not look away from the pot. It is not cooperating. He looked at the pot. The soup, his last packet of instant noodles, had been reduced to a black, smoking paste. You boiled it dry. The water evaporated at a rate I did not anticipate. How long were you heating it? Continuously. He stared at her. She stared at the ruined soup. Pikachu woke up, took one sniff, and buried his face in his paws. Did you, Ash said carefully, use psychic energy to heat the pot instead of the fire? The fire was insufficient. I supplemented it. With how much energy? She was quiet. Mewtwo. The temperature may have briefly exceeded the boiling point of iron. Ash put his face in his hands. His shoulders shook. A sound escaped him, muffled, strangled, building. Are you in distress? Mewtwo asked sharply. He was laughing. He couldn't stop. He was sitting on a bedroll in the wilderness with a psychic demigod who could dismantle a tactical squad with a gesture but had incinerated instant noodles, and the absurdity of it, the beautiful, ridiculous, human absurdity of it, cracked something open in his chest that had been locked tight for years. Mewtwo watched him laugh with an expression that cycled through confusion, indignation, and something dangerously close to embarrassment. It is not amusing, she said. It is incredibly amusing. I will relocate your consciousness to a Magikarp. Worth it. She made a sound that, in a human, would have been called a huff. Her tail lashed once. But the corners of her mouth were doing that thing again, fighting, losing, twitching toward a shape that her face didn't seem to know how to hold. Come on, Ash said, getting to his feet and wiping his eyes. I'll teach you how to make soup without achieving nuclear fusion. And then we need to figure out our next move. Our next move regarding what? Regarding the fact that a military strike team just tried to capture you using me as bait, a mad scientist sent a dying hybrid to fight you for data, and something is cracking open under those standing stones back there that feels like very bad news. Mewtwo tilted her head. You are remarkably calm about this. I've had a weird life. He pulled a fresh packet from his pack. Now pay attention. Fire, pot, water, noodles. No psychic supplementation. The water needs to boil, not sublimate. She sat beside him and watched with the focus of someone memorizing a theorem. When he handed her the stirring spoon, their fingers touched, and neither of them pulled away. Later, fed, packed, moving down the trail toward Viridian City with the morning sun cutting through the canyon above them, Ash's Pokegear buzzed. He pulled it from his pocket and checked the screen. One message. Encrypted channel. The sender ID was a single letter, L, Ash. Stop investigating. Come to Indigo Plateau immediately. There are things about Project Ascension the League has been keeping from you. From everyone. L. Lance. The champion of the Kanto-Jodo League, Dragon Master, one of the few people in the world Ash respected without reservation. If Lance was reaching out on an encrypted channel and telling him to come in, things were worse than he'd thought. Mewtwo read the message over his shoulder. Her eyes narrowed. The League knows, she said. Looks like it. And they have done nothing. We don't know that yet. We know enough. Her voice had gone cold, the detached, analytical tone of someone whose default assumption about institutions was betrayal. They knew about Voss. They knew about the project. And you are only learning of it now because someone used you as bait in a forest. Mewtwo, if they had acted, Subject Theta would not have existed. It would not have suffered. It would not have died in my arms. Her psychic field flared, making the air crackle. Pebbles on the trail rose an inch and trembled. Institutions protect themselves, Ash. Not people. He stopped walking. Turned to face her. The morning light caught her from behind, throwing her shadow long across the trail, and for a moment she looked like something out of myth, the wrathful goddess, the betrayed creation, the storm given form and fury. Maybe, he said. But we won't know until we hear what Lance has to say. And going in angry means going in blind. He held her gaze. I need you to trust me on this. I trust you. The emphasis was precise and unmistakable. I do not trust them. That's fair. Trust me enough to let me handle the talking. If they're hiding something, I'll find it. And if they've let people suffer to protect their politics, his expression hardened, and for an instant the gentle trainer fell away and something older looked out through his eyes. Then I'll deal with it. Mewtwo studied him. Whatever she saw seemed to satisfy her, because the psychic flare dimmed and the pebbles settled. You are more formidable than you appear, she said. Also been told that. It was not entirely a compliment. I'll take what I can get. He pocketed the poke gear and started walking again. Come on. Viridian City's got a train to Indigo Plateau. And on the way, you're going to practice walking like you're not the most dangerous thing in a 500-kilometer radius. I am the most dangerous thing in a 500-kilometer radius. That's the spirit. Now stop glowing, your hair is doing the thing again. She reached up and touched her hair, which was indeed moving in slow, psychic-driven waves despite the lack of wind. She frowned, concentrated, and it settled. Mostly. They walked on, the trainer and the weapon-turned woman, the boy who'd died for 30 seconds and the god who decided that made him hers, toward a city, a conspiracy, and a reckoning that neither of them could see coming but both of them could feel, thrumming beneath their feet like a heartbeat in the bones of the world. Behind them, in the Athorn Valley, the fangs stood silent and cracked. Dark energy pulsed from the fractures in slow, patient waves, reaching upward, outward, finding the fault lines in a barrier that had held for millennia and pressing against them with the gentle, inexorable patience of something that had all the time in the world. Something ancient shifted in its sleep. And dreamed of waking. Chapter 2, the Bond Saffron City hit them like a wall of noise and light after 3 days in the wilderness. Ash had forgotten how loud civilization was, the hum of the magnet train terminal, the chatter of 100 conversations bleeding together, the constant ambient thrum of a city that never fully slept. Neon signs advertising everything from poke marts to battle arenas reflected off wet pavement from a morning rain, turning the streets into rivers of fractured color. People moved in currents, flowing around each other with the practiced indifference of urban life. Mewtwo stood at the terminal exit and did not move. Ash turned back when he realized she wasn't beside him. She was standing just inside the sliding doors, her disguise in place, the psychic illusion she'd woven over herself on the train, turning lavender skin to pale human flesh, violet eyes to dark brown, white hair to black, tail hidden entirely. She looked human. Convincingly, unsettlingly human, like a photograph that was almost but not quite right. But she was staring at the crowd the way a diver stares at deep water. "Hey," he said, stepping back to her. "You okay?" "There are 11,406 people within my passive psychic range," she said quietly. Her disguised face was calm, but her voice had a brittle quality he was learning to recognize. "Each one is a point of mental noise. Desires, fears, surface thoughts, emotional bleed. It is considerable. Can you filter it?" "I am filtering it. If I were not, I would be unconscious." She paused. "Or they would be." A businessman bumped her shoulder rushing past and didn't apologize. Mewtwo's jaw tightened. The man's briefcase latch popped open and his papers exploded into the air like startled birds. "Mewtwo. That was involuntary." "Sure it was. Mostly involuntary." Ash fought back a grin and took her hand. She flinched, then didn't. Her disguised fingers closed around his, and some of the tension left her shoulders. "Focus on me," he said. "Use my thoughts as an anchor. Block everything else." She looked at him. "You are asking me to read your mind. I'm asking you to listen to one voice instead of 11,000. Can you do that?" "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "You are thinking about breakfast." "I'm always thinking about breakfast. Come on." He led her into the city, and she followed, her hand in his, her psychic awareness narrowing to the warm, steady signal of the only mind in the world she wanted to hear. They found a place to stay within the hour, a mid-range hotel near the Saffron Convention Center, where the tournament was being held. Ash booked a single room with 2 beds. Mewtwo informed him that she did not require a bed, would not be sleeping, and would be positioning herself between him and the door at all times. They compromised. She would sit on the second bed and pretend it was a strategic vantage point rather than a place of rest. While Ash showered and changed, his trail clothes had reached the point where Pikachu refused to sit on the shoulder they'd touched. Mewtwo stood at the window and looked out at the city. 17 stories up, saffron sprawled beneath her like a circuit board, all grids and lights and pulsing energy. She dropped her disguise. Lavender skin, white hair, violet eyes reflected in the glass. She looked like a ghost haunting a world that wasn't built for her. "I hate this place," she said when Ash emerged. "You've been here 40 minutes. Sufficient time to form a comprehensive assessment." She turned from the window. "The density of psychic interference is," she stopped. Ash had changed into clean clothes, dark jeans, a fitted black shirt, his league-issued jacket slung over one shoulder. Nothing remarkable. But he'd also clearly made an effort with his hair, which was doing something approaching intentional instead of its usual defiance of physics, and the shirt fit him in ways that his trail gear had not. Mewtwo's gaze tracked from his shoulders to his jaw to his eyes, and she performed the psychic equivalent of walking into a glass door. Her thought process, usually a seamless, multi-threaded river of analysis, hit a wall and stalled. "The density of psychic interference is what?" Ash asked, oblivious, adjusting his jacket. "Irrelevant," she said, too quickly. "We should discuss the tournament." The Saffron Crown was a biannual invitational, 32 trainers selected by league ranking and regional recommendation, battling over 3 days for a title that carried more prestige than prize money. Ash had been invited based on his Kalos conference performance. It was exactly the kind of event he'd normally approach with tactical focus and competitive fire. Today, it was cover. "Lance wants me at Indigo Plateau," Ash said, spreading a city map across the hotel desk. But his message said the league's been covering up Project Ascension. "If I go running to the plateau now, whoever's managing the cover-up knows I'm coming, and they control the environment. I'd rather get what I can hear first." "What is here?" "Sylph Company headquarters." He tapped the map. The massive corporate tower was visible from their window, a glass and steel monolith dominating the eastern skyline. Sylph supplies tech to half the league and 2/3 of the research institutions in Kanto. If Voss is running Project Ascension with league knowledge and government backing, she needs infrastructure. Labs, power, computing. Sylph is the only company in the region that could provide what she'd need without attracting attention. Mewtwo processed this. "You believe there is a facility beneath Sylph Company?" "I believe there's something worth finding. And I believe the tournament gives us 3 days of legitimate reason to be in Saffron without raising flags." "Us," she repeated. "Us." She regarded him with that evaluating look. "You are more strategic than your reputation suggests." "My reputation is that I charge in head first and improvise." "Yes. That's also a strategy. Just not the only one." He folded the map. "First round of the tournament is this afternoon. I need to be seen competing, normal, focused, just another trainer. Meanwhile, I need you to do something for me." "Name it." "The psychic trainers in this city, Sabrina's gym, the dojo, the research center. They'll have ambient psychic networks, information flows. Tap into them carefully. Find out if anyone in the local psychic community knows about unusual activity beneath Sylph. Don't go deep, don't get caught, and don't rearrange anyone's neural pathways. I was going to say, don't make anyone's briefcase explode, but sure, that too." The corner of her mouth twitched. She was getting worse at hiding it. "I will be discreet. That's all I ask." He headed for the door, Pikachu jumping to his shoulder. At the threshold, he paused. "And Mewtwo, keep the disguise tight. Silver's competing in this tournament." Her eyes narrowed. "Giovanni's son. He's sharp, he's angry, and he knows more about his father's projects than anyone alive. If he spots you, we lose control of the situation. If he threatens you, he loses consciousness. Let's call that Plan B." He left. She stood in the empty hotel room, lavender and luminous, and became aware that the place where his hand had held hers on the street was still warm. She raised her fingers to her face and studied them, as if they belonged to someone else. The Saffron Convention Center was a cathedral of competitive battling, a vast arena complex with 6 regulation fields, stadium seating for 20,000, and a media presence that turned every match into a spectacle. Holographic displays projected trainer stats. Commentators' voices echoed off vaulted ceilings. The air smelled like ozone and popcorn and the particular electric tension that only existed in places where powerful creatures were about to collide. Ash registered at the competitor's desk, collected his bracket assignment, and scanned the draw sheet. 32 names. He recognized most of them, regional standouts, gym veterans, a few he'd faced before. His first-round opponent was a trainer from Hoenn named Callista who specialized in steel types. Manageable. His gaze snagged on a name in the opposite bracket. Silver. Figures, he muttered. The first round went clean. Callista was good, her Agron was a tank, her Metagross was tactically deployed, and she read the field with a veteran's eye. But Ash had Lucario, and Lucario against steel types was a conversation with a predetermined ending. Aura Sphere punched through Metagross's bullet punch like it wasn't there, and a well-timed close combat turned Agron into an expensive obstacle. 3 minutes, 40 seconds. The crowd was impressed. The commentators used words like surgical and masterclass. Ash barely heard them. He was watching the tunnel entrance on the far side of the arena, where a figure with red hair and a permanent scowl had just arrived. Silver hadn't changed much in the years since Ash had last seen him. Still lean, still coiled, still radiating the particular intensity of someone who'd been born into darkness and had clawed his way out with bleeding fingernails. He wore black, always black, and his Pokémon were visible on his belt in dark-capped balls that matched his aesthetic. His eyes swept the arena with calculating precision, cataloging threats, dismissing weaknesses, filing everything away. Those eyes found Ash. Held. Something cold and knowing passed across Silver's expression. He looked up at the stands. Ash followed his gaze. Mewtwo was there, disguised, seated among the spectators in the upper tier. She dressed the illusion in civilian clothes, a high-collared coat, dark pants, the kind of anonymously stylish outfit that lets someone disappear in a crowd. She was doing a credible job of looking like a bored spectator. Silver looked back at Ash. The message was clear, I see her. The confrontation came an hour later, in a service corridor behind the competitor's staging area. Ash had expected it. He'd positioned himself there deliberately, away from cameras and crowds, giving Silver the opening he knew the other trainer would take. Silver came around the corner and stopped 3 meters away. His hands were in his pockets. His posture was relaxed. But his eyes were anything but. That thing sitting in the stands wearing a human face, Silver said. That's my father's property. Ash leaned against the wall. Good to see you too, Silver. Don't play dumb. I've been trained to detect psychic illusions since I was 6 years old. Giovanni made sure of that, one of his many gifts to his loving son. The bitterness in his voice could have corroded steel. She's good. Better than anything I've ever seen. But no illusion is perfect, and I know what Mewtwo's psychic signature feels like. I grew up in a house where my father talked about that project the way other men talk about their favorite sports team. She's not property. She's a multi-billion credit genetic weapon engineered by a criminal organization. You don't get to slap a new label on that and pretend it's a rescue puppy. Ash straightened off the wall. She's a person. She thinks, she feels, she makes choices. Your father didn't create a weapon, he created a living being and treated her like a tool, and now you're standing here doing the same thing with different words. Silver's jaw tightened. You have no idea what you're playing with. That person destroyed a laboratory and killed 7 people. People who were experimenting on her. People who would have turned her into exactly the weapon you're describing. And that makes it okay? It makes it complicated. But she's not your father's, she's not a weapon, and she's not a thing. Ash held Silver's stare without blinking. And if you call her thing again, we're going to have a problem. Something shifted in Silver's expression. Not backing down, he wasn't built for that. But recalculating. Ash saw the precise moment Silver realized that the trainer in front of him wasn't the loud, impulsive kid he'd clashed with years ago. This was someone who meant exactly what he said and had the will to back it up. You're in over your head, Ketchum. Maybe. But I'm not drowning yet. Silver held his gaze for 3 more seconds. Then he turned on his heel and walked away. At the corner, he stopped without looking back. Quarterfinals, he said. You and me. If the bracket holds. I'll be there. I know you will. He paused. When I win, we're having a longer conversation about what happens to genetic abominations when they fall into the hands of naive idealists. He disappeared around the corner. Ash exhaled slowly, rolled his shoulders, and pulled out his poke gear. He knows, he texted Mewtwo. Didn't escalate. Be careful. The response came instantly, I am always careful. Also, his psychic shielding is impressive for a human. His father trained him well. Then, a second later, I do not like him. Ash almost smiled. Join the club. The meeting with Lance happened that evening, in a private room at the Saffron Pokemon Center that had been swept for surveillance devices 3 times. Lance had come to the city personally, a fact that told Ash more about the severity of the situation than anything the champion could have said. Lance looked tired. Not physically, the man was built like a statue and carried himself with the coiled grace of his dragons, but something behind his eyes had gone hollow. The look of someone carrying knowledge that was too heavy and too sharp, who'd been carrying it for too long. Thanks for coming, Ash said, closing the door. I should be saying that to you. Lance sat at the small table and folded his hands. His cape, he never went anywhere without the cape, pooled around the chair like a red tide. Where is she? Close. I need to see her, Ash. She's not ready for that. This isn't about ready. The League Council is meeting in 48 hours. There's a motion on the table to classify all humanoid Pokemon hybrids as Class 7 threats, equivalent to rogue legendaries. If that passes, it gives the League legal authority to capture or destroy any hybrid on site. No trial, no hearing, no appeal. The words landed like stones. Ash felt them in his gut. Who's pushing it? Counselors with ties to the military-industrial complex. The same people who funded Voss's research in the first place. They want the hybrids classified as threats so they can seize them as assets under emergency protocols. They funded the creation and now they want to own the product. Welcome to politics. Ash sat down across from him. You said the League has known about Project Ascension for 5 years. What did you do with that 5 years, Lance? The champion met his eyes. To his credit, he didn't flinch. Not enough. I knew Voss was conducting research into human Pokemon genetic integration. I knew Giovanni had originally funded it. I knew there were government backers who picked up the tab after Rocket fell. I pushed for an investigation, and the council shut me down. Twice. I was told it was a matter of regional security and that my role was to train and battle, not to interfere with classified research programs. And you accepted that. I fought it through channels. Legal challenges, information requests, back-channel pressure. Everything I could do within the system. While people like Subject Theta were being created and tortured and thrown away like broken toys. Lance's jaw worked. Yes. That's not good enough. I know. It came out quiet and rough, and Ash realized with a start that the hollowness in Lance's eyes wasn't just fatigue. It was guilt. Real, corrosive guilt, the kind that ate you from the inside. I have a source inside Sylph Company, Lance said after a moment. Low level, but connected. They confirmed what you suspected. Voss has a sub-level facility beneath the main Sylph Tower. Labs, tanks, the works. It's off the official building plans, powered by a diverted line from the city grid. She's been operating there for at least 2 years. And Silpha's board? Some of them know. The ones who matter. They've been providing equipment and infrastructure in exchange for first access to any commercially viable applications of the hybrid research. Commercially viable. Ash repeated the phrase like it tasted rotten. They're talking about selling this. They're talking about a world where trainers don't just command Pokémon, they become them. Hybrid soldiers, hybrid workers, hybrid athletes. The market potential is. Lance trailed off, apparently unable to say the word. Obscene. The word I was avoiding, yes. Ash leaned back in his chair. The picture was bigger than he'd thought. Not just a rogue scientist, a network. Government backers, corporate infrastructure, league complicity through inaction. Voss wasn't operating in the shadows. She was operating in the space that powerful institutions had deliberately left dark. I need to get into that sublevel, Ash said. Absolutely not. If you're caught, it gives the council ammunition. Rogue trainer breaks into classified facility, associated with unregistered Class 7 entity, they'll use it to justify the motion and come after both of you. Then I won't get caught. Ash, 5 years, Lance. 5 years of channels and legal challenges and back-channel pressure, and what's changed? Nothing. Voss is still operating. People are still suffering. The council is about to give her more power, not less. He stood. I'm going in. Tonight, if possible. What I find in there will determine what happens next. Lance stared at him for a long moment. Then he reached into his cape, the thing apparently had pockets, which Ash filed away as useful information, and produced a keycard. Service entrance, northwest corner of the Sylph Tower. Access code is 773 Alpha. It'll get you past the first 2 security checkpoints. After that, you're on your own. Ash took the card. I thought you wanted me to stay out of it. I wanted you to be safe. But I've watched you for years, Ash. You were never going to be safe. You were always going to be right. He stood, adjusting his cape. Find what you can. Document everything. And for the love of Arceus, don't get killed. Doing my best. Lance paused at the door. The woman, Mewtwo. Is she what the files describe? She's more powerful. More human. Lance absorbed that. Nodded once. Left. Ash stood alone in the empty room, keycard in hand, and felt the weight of what was coming settle onto his shoulders like armor he hadn't asked for but couldn't take off. Pikachu nuzzled his cheek. He scratched behind the yellow ears. Big night ahead, buddy. Pika. Yeah. I know. The second round of the tournament the next morning was a formality. Ash's opponent, a competent but predictable trainer from Sinnoh, made the mistake of leading with a Garchomp against Ash's Greninja. The water-type speed and Ash's ability to read the field 2 moves ahead turned it into a clinic. The Sinnoh trainer recalled his Garchomp after 90 seconds and forfeited rather than watch it take more punishment. The crowd roared. Ash barely registered it. His mind was already in the Sylph sublevel. He found Mewtwo in the hotel room afterward, standing at the window again. She dropped her disguise, the effort of maintaining it in a city this psychically dense was draining her more than she'd admitted, and the afternoon light through the glass turned her skin to pale amethyst. I found something, she said without turning around. The psychic networks. Sabrina's gym maintains an ambient telepathic web that monitors psychic activity throughout the city. It's primarily defensive, designed to detect hostile psychic intrusions. But it also records anomalies. She turned. There have been 17 psychic anomalies recorded beneath Sylph Company in the past 6 months. Each one consistent with a living psychic-type Pokémon in significant distress. The hybrids. Yes. The gym recorded them and flagged them for review, but the flags were suppressed at the administrative level. Someone inside the gym's bureaucracy has been burying the reports. Can you trace who? I already have. A mid-level administrator named Hideo Tanaka. He receives a monthly payment from a shell company that traces back to Silpha's Special Projects division. She paused. I could simply extract the information from his mind. It would take seconds. No. It would be efficient. It would be a violation. We're not doing this by tearing through people's heads. Even people who are complicit in torturing sentient beings. Even them. We do this right, or we're no better than Voss. She held his gaze, and he saw the war in her eyes, the part of her that was pure pragmatic power butting against something newer, something he was slowly building in her through nothing more than stubborn insistence on doing things the hard way. You make everything more difficult, she said. It's a gift. It is not. But she didn't argue further. They went over the plan. Ash would enter through the service entrance Lance had provided. Mewtwo would maintain a psychic link with him from the hotel, close enough to monitor, far enough to avoid detection by whatever psychic countermeasures Voss had in place. If things went sideways, she'd come in. No argument on that point. If I sense your heartbeat exceed combat parameters without corresponding physical exertion, I will assume hostile contact and respond, she said. Define respond. Immediate teleportation to your location followed by the neutralization of all threats within my perceptive range. Can you be more specific about neutralization? No. He didn't push it. The hours before the infiltration stretched like taffy. Ash tried to rest. Couldn't. His mind kept cycling through scenarios, entry points, exit routes, contingencies. The tactical part of his brain was well-oiled machinery, spinning smoothly. The rest of him was a mess. Mewtwo sat on the second bed, she'd stopped pretending it was purely strategic, and watched him not sleep. Your cortisol levels are elevated, she observed. Shocking. Sarcasm is a coping mechanism that, I know what sarcasm is, thanks. Silence. Then, would it help if I told you something? He opened one eye. Depends on what. She was quiet for a moment. Not calculating, deciding. He'd learned to tell the difference. Calculation was fast, analytical, cold. Decision was slower, weighted with something that lived deeper than logic. When I first began watching you, she said, I did not understand what I was feeling. I knew I was drawn to you. I knew I could not leave. But the sensation had no name in my experience. I catalogued it as an anomaly, a glitch in my psychological architecture, perhaps a remnant of the emotional imprinting process that Voss had initiated before I escaped. She paused. Ash waited. It took me 2 years to understand that it was not a glitch. By then, I had watched you lose at the Lily of the Valley conference and refused to be diminished by it. I had watched you give your jacket to a lost child in a rainstorm and walk home soaking wet. I had watched you sit beside a dying Pokémon on a roadside and hold it until it passed because the nearest center was too far and you would not let it be alone. Her voice had gone quiet. Not small, Mewtwo could never be small. But gentle in a way that seemed to cost her something. That was when I understood. The anomaly had a name. It was simply one I had never been given language for. Ash sat up. His heart was doing something complicated in his chest. What name? He asked, though he already knew. She looked at him with those violet eyes, ancient and young simultaneously, the eyes of a being who had been alive for less than a decade but carried the weight of something far older. I think you know, she said. He did. The moment hung between them like a held breath. Then Pikachu, who had been dozing on the pillow, rolled over and fell off the bed with a startled pika that shattered the tension like a brick through glass. Ash caught him. Mewtwo blinked. The moment dissolved into something warmer and less terrifying, and Ash was simultaneously grateful and frustrated. Your companion has impeccable timing, Mewtwo observed drily. He really does. Ash set Pikachu back on the pillow and scratched his ears until the electric mouse settled. Then he looked at Mewtwo. When this is done, he said. The mission, the tournament, all of it. We should talk about that. For real. For real, she repeated, testing the phrase. Yeah. I would not be opposed to that. Good. He lay back down. Closed his eyes. Now stop monitoring my cortisol levels and let me pretend to sleep. Your cortisol levels are actually decreasing. Mewtwo. I am simply reporting, good night. She went quiet. But when he opened one eye a crack, he saw her, sitting on the edge of her bed, hands folded in her lap, the ghost of a smile on her lavender lips and something luminous in her eyes that had nothing to do with psychic energy. He closed his eye and this time sleep came, warm and unexpected, pulling him under with the gentle certainty of a current that knew where it was going. He woke in the dark. Midnight. Time to move. The streets of Saffron City at night were different, quieter, sharper, the neon signs casting longer shadows and the few pedestrians moving with the hurried purpose of people who wanted to be somewhere else. Ash moved through them like a fish through familiar water, hood up, hands in pockets, Pikachu tucked inside his jacket with only his ears visible. I have you, Mewtwo's voice said in his mind. Not intrusive, a presence at the edge of his awareness, like a hand resting on his shoulder. Your route is clear for 6 blocks. There is a security patrol near the Northwest Service entrance, 2 guards, 1 Arcanine. They cycle past every 8 minutes. Copy. How's the link? Stable. I can maintain it at this distance without detection. The facility's psychic shielding is significant, however. Once you descend below the 3rd sublevel, I may lose resolution. Understood. If you lose me, I will come. I know. He timed the patrol and slipped through the service entrance with the keycard. The door opened onto a utilitarian stairwell, concrete, fluorescent lighting, the kind of space that existed in every corporate building and that no one ever looked at twice. He descended. The first 2 sublevels were storage, crates, server rooms, climate control equipment. Normal corporate infrastructure. The security checkpoints Lance had warned about were there, electronic locks requiring the keycard and the access code. Both worked. Ash filed away a note to thank Lance properly if he survived the night. The 3rd sublevel was where things changed. The stairwell ended at a heavy door that wasn't on any building plan. It was reinforced, military-grade, the kind of door designed to withstand a direct hyper beam. The keycard didn't work here. Neither did the access code. Ash studied the lock. Biometric scanner, palm print and retinal. No way to fake it, no way to bypass it without, the lock clicked. The door swung open. Ash stared at it. You're welcome, Mewtwo said in his mind. The biometric scanner is controlled by a computer. Computers think in electrical impulses. Electrical impulses are energy. Energy is mine. Show off. Accurate. He slipped through the door and descended into the real sublevel. The air changed immediately. Colder, damper, humming with a frequency that set his teeth on edge. The corridor was clean, too clean, the white walls and floors gleaming under surgical lighting, the air scrubbed and filtered and somehow sterile in a way that felt aggressive. Like the building itself was trying to eliminate any trace of the living things it contained. Ash moved down the corridor, Pikachu's ears twitching at every sound. Doors branched off at intervals, labs, offices, equipment rooms. Most were dark. He checked each one quickly, efficiently, cataloging what he found. Lab 1, genetic sequencing equipment, centrifuges, electron microscopes. Standard biotech, high-end but not unusual. Lab 2, psychic measurement devices, resonance scanners, wave pattern analyzers, something that looked like an MRI machine but was clearly designed for a brain much larger than any human's. Mewtwo's brain, he realized. This was where they'd studied her. Lab 3 was locked with an additional security layer. Ash tried the door. Sealed. He was about to move on when he heard it. A sound. Thin, high, wavering. Coming from behind the sealed door. Not an alarm. Not a machine. A voice. Muffled, inarticulate, but unmistakably alive. Pikachu. Ash's voice was barely a whisper. Iron tail. The hinges. Pikachu's tail flashed silver. 2 precise strikes, surgical, controlled, and the hinges shattered. Ash caught the door before it fell and eased it aside. The room beyond was large. Circular. And full of tanks. Ash stood in the doorway and felt the world tilt beneath him. There were dozens of them. Floor-to-ceiling cylindrical tanks filled with pale blue fluid, each one containing a shape that was human and not human, Pokemon and not Pokemon. They floated in the nutrient solution, suspended by cables and tubes, their eyes closed or open or, in some cases, absent entirely, their bodies in various stages of completion. Some were almost beautiful. A figure with Gardevoir features, green and white and graceful, with a face that was heartbreakingly close to human. A tall form with Lucario characteristics, blue-furred, lean, its paws tipped with something that might have been fingers. A small shape curled in fetal position that combined EV and human features into something that looked like a sleeping child. Others were not beautiful. Bodies that had gone wrong, limbs at impossible angles, features melted together, flesh that rippled and shifted as if it couldn't decide what shape it wanted to be. These ones were the source of the sound Ash had heard. They were keening, a low, constant, barely audible cry of pain that filled the room like a second atmosphere. Ash's hands were shaking. He made them stop. He moved through the room, forcing himself to look at each tank, to see each subject, to bear witness. Pikachu pressed tight against his neck, trembling. The little Pokemon had seen a lot in his years with Ash, but this was different. This was a horror that went beyond battle or danger into something fundamentally wrong. At the far end of the room, a workstation was still active, screens displaying vital signs, genetic readouts, progress reports. Ash pulled a data drive from his pocket and plugged it in. The download began. While it ran, he read. The files were clinical. Detached. Written in the dispassionate language of science that had forgotten it was talking about living beings. Subject 7 Alpha, Gardevoir Hybrid, Generation 3. Cognitive function at 84% human baseline. Psychic output at 23% of projected capacity. Cellular stability declining. Estimated viability without fluid support, 4 hours. Note, subject displays emotional responses consistent with human bonding behavior. Recommend further study before scheduled termination. Subject 12 Beta, Lucario Hybrid, Generation 2. Aura sensitivity at 200% human baseline. Motor function impaired, left arm non-responsive. Subject has begun vocalizing. Linguistic analysis suggests attempt at speech. Recommend vocal cord suppression to prevent complications during inspection. Ash stopped reading. If he read any more, he was going to break something, and he needed to stay focused. The download completed. He pocketed the data drive and turned back to the tanks. The Gardevoir Hybrid, Subject 7 Alpha, was looking at him. Her eyes were open, green and luminous, filled with an intelligence that the clinical file had quantified at 84% human baseline, but that looked, to Ash, like 100% of a person trapped in a glass cage. She pressed her hand against the tank wall. Delicate fingers, longer than human, green-skinned, splayed against the curved glass. Her mouth moved. Please. The word wasn't spoken. It was projected, a faint, desperate wisp of psychic communication, so weak it barely registered, directed at the only consciousness in the room that might hear it. Ash pressed his hand against the glass opposite hers. "I'm going to help you," he said. "I don't know how yet, but I'm going to help." Her eyes filled with something that might have been hope or might have been despair. In the tanks around her, other subjects stirred, drawn by the sound of a voice that wasn't clinical, wasn't detached, wasn't treating them like data points. A researcher had been left behind. Ash found him in a side office, a young man, mid-20s, asleep at his desk in a lab coat with coffee stains on the collar. He woke up when Ash's shadow fell across him and immediately went pale. "I'm not going to hurt you," Ash said. He didn't need to add the implicit threat. Pikachu was on his shoulder, cheeks sparking, and the young man was smart enough to read the situation. I'm just a tech. I monitor the tanks, adjust the fluid levels. I don't. Tell me about the subjects. Can they survive outside the tanks?" The tech's eyes darted to the doorway. "No escape. No. The nutrient fluid is the only thing holding their cellular structure together. Without it, the genetic integration fails. They'd come apart. Hours, maybe less. All of them. The later generations are more stable. 7 alpha, maybe 15 gamma, they might last a day, 2 days. But without ongoing support, they'd still deteriorate." Ash's chest tightened. "If I destroy this lab, they die." The tech said it with the flat resignation of someone who'd run that calculation 100 times. "If you destroy the equipment, the fluid balance fails. If you cut the power, the temperature regulation fails. Either way." He gestured helplessly at the tanks. Ash stood in the center of the room and felt the weight of an impossible choice pressing down on him. Destroy the lab. End Vasa's ability to create new subjects. Save future victims. Kill the ones already here. Leave the lab intact. The existing subjects live, in tanks, in pain, as experiments. And Vas continues her work, creating more. There was no clean answer. There was no version of this that didn't cost something unbearable. Ash. Mewtwo's voice in his mind, tight with strain. "I can feel them. Their pain. Their fear. I can feel all of it. I know. They are what I was. What I would have been." A pause that thrummed with barely contained fury. "Destroy the lab. End it. Their existence is suffering. I know this. I was this." Ash looked at the Gardevoir hybrid. She was still watching him, her hand still pressed against the glass. The word she'd projected hung in his memory like a bell still ringing. "Please. Please what? Please save me. Please end this. Please don't leave me here." He made his decision. "I'm taking the data," he told the tech. "Everything on these drives, every file, every research note. I'm also destroying the sequencing equipment, the genetic modification rigs, and every piece of hardware that could be used to create new subjects." He looked at the tanks. "But I'm not killing them. Not today. Ash, there are people who can help them. Geneticists who aren't monsters, medical Pokemon, psychic healers. It might take weeks. It might take months. But I'm not sentencing them to death because it's easier than finding another way. You are making this harder because your heart is too large for your chest. Yeah. It's a problem." He went to work. Systematically, methodically, he and Pikachu dismantled every piece of equipment that could be used for creation, sequencing rigs shattered by Iron Tail, modification arrays fried by precisely targeted thunderbolts, data servers wiped after his drive had copied everything. He left the life support systems intact. The tanks hummed on, their occupants floating in their blue cocoons, alive. The tech watched with wide eyes and said nothing. When it was done, Ash stood in the center of the gutted lab and looked at the Gardevoir hybrid one last time. "I'll come back," he said. "I promise." She closed her eyes. The faintest trace of a smile crossed her green-white features. He left. The night air hit him like a slap when he emerged from the service entrance. Cool, clean, real. He stood in the alley behind Sylph Company and breathed, deep, ragged breaths that shook on the exhale, the kind of breathing that happened when you've been holding yourself together by force of will and the will was starting to fray. Pikachu pressed against his neck and made small, comforting sounds. "Yeah, buddy," Ash whispered. "I know." He was 2 blocks from the hotel when the air changed. Not the violent, sudden shift of Mewtwo's arrival. This was different, subtle, creeping, like the temperature drop before a frost. The streetlights flickered. The ambient noise of the city dimmed, as if someone were turning down a volume dial on reality itself. A man stepped out of the shadows ahead of him. He was tall, lean, dressed in traveling clothes that could have belonged to any trainer on any road. Brown hair, calm eyes, an unremarkable face. The only remarkable thing about him was the blade at his hip, which glowed with a warm, golden light that cast no shadows. Kalen. The Arbiter. Ash knew it with the same bone-deep certainty that he'd recognized Mewtwo's psychic signature in the Athorn Valley. This was not a human. This was something wearing humanity like a coat, something older and more purposeful, and the golden light from that blade was the light of divine mandate. Arceus's will made sharp and carried by mortal hands. "Ash Ketchum," Kalen said. His voice was pleasant, unhurried, the voice of a man who had never needed to rush. "I'd hoped we wouldn't meet like this." "Like what?" "On opposite sides." Ash's hand went to his belt. Pikachu's cheeks crackled. "We don't have to be on opposite sides." "I'm afraid we do." Kalen didn't draw the blade. He didn't need to, his presence alone was a pressure, a weight on the air that made Ash's skin prickle. "I am an arbiter. My purpose is to maintain the boundary between human and Pokemon, the fundamental distinction that Arceus established when it shaped this world from chaos. Your companion, the hybrid, is a violation of that boundary. Her existence weakens the seal that holds back a force older than Arceus itself." "The cracks," Ash said. "In the Athorn Valley. The standing stones. One of many sights. The seal is failing across the world. Ancient prisons are opening. Legendary Pokemon grow restless. And at the center of it all," Kalen's gaze was almost gentle, "is a being who should not exist, bonded to a human in a way that blurs the line between species more profoundly than anything in recorded history. She didn't choose to be created. No. But she chose to bond with you. And you chose to accept it. And every moment that bond deepens, the seal weakens further." He took a step forward. "I've shown restraint, Ash. I've watched, I've waited, I've hoped the situation would resolve without intervention. But after what you did tonight in that laboratory, after the psychic resonance your bond generated during the battle in the valley," he shook his head. "The mathematics are clear. If this continues, the primordial will wake. And if it wakes, the distinction between human and Pokemon will dissolve. Not evolution, dissolution. Every identity, every consciousness, every individual mind melted into a single, undifferentiated chaos. And your solution is what? Take her. Contain her. Separate you. The bond is the catalyst. If she can be removed from your influence, placed somewhere the resonance can't reach, a cage. A sanctuary. Bullshit." Ash's voice was flat and hard. "You're talking about locking her away because she had the audacity to care about someone. That's not maintaining order. That's punishing her for being alive." Kalen's expression flickered, a crack in the calm, quickly sealed. "I take no pleasure in this. But the alternative is the end of everything." "I don't believe that. I don't believe the only options are her suffering or the world ending. There's always another way. The optimism of youth. The laziness of absolutes." Kalen went still. Then, Slowly, he drew the blade. The golden light intensified, warm and terrible, the light of a setting sun that would never rise again. Ash felt it press against him like a physical force, not painful but heavy, laden with authority and ancient power. Pikachu flinched on his shoulder. "I am giving you a choice," Kalen said. "Release her from your life. Let me take her somewhere safe, truly safe, not a lab, not a cage, a place where she can exist without endangering the fabric of reality. Do this, and you walk away. You continue your life. You compete in your tournaments, you chase your dreams. She lives, you live, the world lives. And if I refuse? Then I take her by force. And I am not gentle about it." Ash looked at the blade. At the golden light. At the calm, sad eyes of a man, a being, who genuinely believed he was doing the right thing. He thought about the Gardevoir hybrid pressing her hand against the glass. He thought about Theta dying in Mewtwo's arms. He thought about a woman who'd never felt safe enough to close her eyes sitting on a hotel bed and almost smiling because a boy told her the truth. "Nobody," Ash said quietly, "is containing anyone." He released Lucario and Charizard simultaneously. The fire-type's roar shook the street. Lucario materialized in a combat stance, aura sensors flaring, already reading Kalen's energy and bristling at what it found. Kalen didn't look surprised. He looked resigned. "So be it," he said, and attacked. The suppression field hit first, a wave of golden energy that rolled outward from Kalen's blade in a perfect sphere, and where it passed, the world went flat. Color dimmed. Sound muffled. The ambient psychic energy of the city, the constant background hum of 11,000 minds, vanished like a candle blown out. Pikachu's electricity guttered. Charizard's flame shrank. Lucario staggered, his aura sensors going dark, then flickering back at a fraction of their normal intensity. Not a psychic attack. A suppression. Kalen's divine mandate made manifest, the enforcement of boundaries, the separation of powers, the insistence that things remain in their designated categories. In his presence, Pokémon abilities weakened. The extraordinary became ordinary. "Your Pokémon will function at approximately 40% capacity within my field," Kalen said, advancing with his blade held low. "I take no joy in diminishing them. But this is what I am." Ash adjusted instantly. 40% capacity meant Charizard's flamethrower was a bonfire instead of an inferno. Meant Pikachu's thunderbolt was a shock instead of a lightning strike. Meant Lucario's aura sphere was a flashlight instead of a cannon. But 40% of an elite team was still dangerous. And Kalen, for all his power, was fighting 3-on-1 against a trainer who'd made a career out of being underestimated. Charizard, smoke screen. Lucario, wide pattern aura sphere, don't aim, saturate. Pikachu, with me. Charizard belched a cloud of thick, black smoke that filled the street. Diminished or not, smokescreen wasn't an attack, it was particulate matter, and Kalen's suppression field couldn't make smoke less opaque. Lucario launched aura spheres in a scatter pattern, weak individually, but numerous, forcing Kalen to move and block rather than advance. Kalen cut through the smoke with his blade, golden light carving arcs that dispersed the darkness. He was fast, faster than a human should be, moving with a fluid precision that spoke of centuries of combat. His blade met Lucario's bone rush and the clash sent shockwaves rippling through the street. Lucario was driven back, but held. Ash circled. Watched. Analyzed. Kalen was powerful, but he was fighting with restraint, using the flat of the blade, pulling his strikes, trying to incapacitate rather than kill. Which meant he had limits. Not physical, moral. He didn't want to hurt Ash's Pokémon. He wanted to make a point. That was exploitable. Pikachu, quick attack, low, go for the legs. Don't try to shock him, close the distance and force him to dodge. Pikachu blurred. Even at 40%, quick attack was fast, a yellow streak that came in at ankle height and forced Kalen to leap backward. In the half-second the Arbiter was airborne, Lucario was there, close combat, a devastating flurry of strikes at reduced power that still hit like hammers. Kalen blocked 3, took 2, and countered with a sweep of his blade that forced Lucario to disengage. But Ash had seen it. In the moment Kalen focused on Lucario, his suppression field had flickered, not failed, but wavered, like a flame in a draft. It was concentration dependent. He had to maintain it actively, and combat divided his focus. Charizard, Dragon Rage, Maximum Spread. Lucario, when the field flickers, Aura Sphere, everything you've got, Center Mass. Charizard's Dragon Rage was a wall of draconic energy, blue-white and screaming, not a precise attack but an overwhelming wave that Kalen had to put everything into blocking. His blade came up, golden light blazing, and the suppression field concentrated forward to meet the Dragon Rage. Behind him, Lucario felt the field thin. His aura sensors flared to full intensity for one brilliant second. He poured everything into a single aura sphere, not the diminished flicker of before but the real thing, blazing blue, concentrated and devastating. Kalen sensed it. Spun. But he was a fraction of a second too slow. The aura sphere caught his shoulder and detonated, golden light and blue energy colliding in a shockwave that blew out every window on the street. The Arbiter staggered. His suppression field wavered wildly, pulsing and contracting. Blood, red, human, mundane, ran from the wound on his shoulder. He looked at it with genuine surprise. And then Mewtwo was there. She didn't teleport, she arrived, displacement of air and space folding around her like a cloak dropped from immense height. The suppression field hit her and she pushed through it, not easily, not cleanly, but with grinding, relentless force, her psychic energy compressing and intensifying until it burned through the golden light like a violet sun through morning fog. She was diminished. Ash could see it, she wasn't at full power, the field was cutting her down. But even diminished, she was Mewtwo. And she was angry. "You will not touch him," she said. Kalen straightened, blood on his shoulder, divine light flickering. He looked at her, really looked, the way he hadn't in the valley. Saw the lavender skin and violet eyes and white hair, the impossible fusion of human and Pokemon, the being that shouldn't exist but did, fiercely and undeniably. "The bond amplifies you both," he said. There was wonder in his voice, underneath the resolve. His tactical mind, your power. Together, your. He trailed off. More than you expected, Ash finished, stepping up beside Mewtwo. Kalen looked between them. The golden blade dimmed, not extinguished, but lowered, the aggressive intent draining out of his stance. "I will return," he said quietly. "And next time, I will not hold back. The seal is weakening, Ash. Every day, every hour. The primordial stirs, and when it wakes," he looked at Mewtwo with something that was almost compassion. "Consider what you're willing to sacrifice. Both of you." He sheathed the blade. The suppression field collapsed. Sound and color rushed back into the world like water filling a dry channel. Ash gasped at the sudden sensory flood. When his vision cleared, Kalen was gone. Ash's legs went out from under him. Not dramatically, just a slow, inevitable collapse as the adrenaline drained and his body remembered that he'd been awake for 20 hours, infiltrated a secret lab, and fought a divine enforcer. He sat down on the cracked pavement and breathed. Charizard and Lucario flanked him, battered but standing. Pikachu climbed onto his lap. Mewtwo was shaking. Not the controlled tremor of exertion. This was different, full body, violent, her hands clenching and unclenching at her sides, her psychic field sputtering and flaring in irregular bursts. Her eyes were wide, fixed on the spot where Kalen had stood, and in them Ash saw something he'd never seen before. Fear. Not fear of Kalen. Not fear of his blade or his power or his divine mandate. Fear of the suppression field, the thing that had reached inside her and turned down the volume on everything she was. For the first time in her existence, she'd felt diminished. Mortal. Limited. Vulnerable in a way that went beyond physical danger into something existential. She'd felt what it would be like to be taken from Ash. To be too weak to stop it. "Mewtwo," he said. "Hey. Look at me." She didn't seem to hear him. Her shaking intensified. The streetlights around them flickered and buzzed as her destabilized psychic field bled into the electrical infrastructure. Ash stood. His legs protested. He ignored them. He crossed the distance between them and put his hands on her arms, gently, firmly, grounding. "Look at me." She looked. Her violet eyes were fractured with fear, the composed mask she wore shattered completely. This was Mewtwo stripped bare, not the weapon, not the protector, not the impossibly powerful being who'd chosen him. Just a person who discovered she could lose the one thing that mattered and was drowning in the terror of it. "I will not be taken from you," she said. Her voice cracked and reformed, cracked and reformed. "I refuse. I have existed in silence and in shadow and in pain and in nothing, and I will not go back. I will not, I cannot." She couldn't find the words. She'd never had to articulate this feeling because she'd never felt it, this desperate, clawing, overwhelming need that had no clinical name, no analytical framework, no psychic solution. It was raw and human, and it was destroying her composure like fire through paper. Ash's hands moved from her arms to her face. His palms cupped her cheeks, lavender skin cool against his warmth, the faint bioluminescent lines beneath her skin pulsing erratically under his fingers. His thumbs brushed the elegant ridges beneath her eyes. "Then stay," he said. He kissed her. For one full second, she didn't move. Every process in her extraordinary mind went silent, the constant analysis, the environmental monitoring, the psychic awareness that spanned kilometers. All of it stopped. For 1 second, she was nothing but the sensation of his mouth on hers, warm and certain and present, and the complete, devastating novelty of being touched by someone who wanted nothing from her except this. Then she responded. Her hands came up, those long, elegant, two-jointed fingers, and gripped his jacket with a force that would have torn the fabric if she hadn't been restraining herself with every thread of control she had left. She pulled him closer, and the kiss deepened from gentle to desperate, from careful to consuming. Her psychic energy flared around them both, violet light spiraling upward like an aurora, warm and electric, and where it touched Ash's skin he felt it like a second heartbeat, her consciousness brushing against his in a contact more intimate than any physical touch. When they broke apart, they were both breathing hard. Her forehead rested against his. Her eyes were closed. The trembling had stopped. "I did not know it felt like that," she whispered. "Yeah." His voice was rough. "Me neither." She opened her eyes. This close, he could see the depths of them, not just violet but layered, complex, shimmering with wavelengths that human eyes shouldn't have been able to perceive but that he perceived anyway, as if the kiss had opened a door between them that couldn't be closed. "Your heart rate is significantly elevated," she murmured. "Don't ruin it." "I am merely observing," he kissed her again. Shorter this time, but no less certain. She made a small sound against his mouth, involuntary, surprised, that was the most human thing he'd ever heard from her. When he pulled back, she was almost smiling. Not the suppressed twitch he'd seen before, a real smile, small and wondering and entirely hers. "We need to get off the street," he said. "Before someone notices the blown-out windows and the psychic aurora." "Yes." She didn't let go of his jacket. "Mewtwo." A moment. She was looking at him with those layered, luminous eyes, and the intensity in them was different now, not the desperate possessiveness of before, but something warmer, deeper, more settled. Like a compass needle finding north and finally stopping. "I want to remember this. Precisely. Every detail. You have perfect memory. This deserves better than perfect. This deserves felt." He didn't have an answer for that. So he just stood there, in a wrecked street in Saffron City at 2 in the morning, and let her look at him for as long as she needed. When she finally released his jacket and straightened, some essential rearrangement had taken place inside her. He could see it in the way she held herself, still powerful, still dangerous, still unmistakably Mewtwo. But the edges were different. Softer where they touched him, sharper where they faced the world. As if the kiss had clarified something she'd been trying to understand since the day she escaped the lab and discovered that freedom, without someone to share it with, was just a more spacious cage. "Let's go," she said. They walked back to the hotel together. At some point, her hand found his. At some point, his fingers intertwined with hers. Neither of them commented on it. Pikachu, perched on Ash's other shoulder, looked between them with an expression of deep, mouse-like satisfaction and said nothing. For blocks away, in the shadow of a fire escape on a building he shouldn't have been able to climb, Silver lowered a pair of high-powered binoculars and sat very still for a very long time. He'd followed Ash. Of course he had. Silver hadn't survived a childhood under Giovanni's roof by being trusting. When he'd seen Ketchum heading towards Sylph Company at midnight, he'd tailed him. When Ketchum had entered the building, Silver had waited. When Ketchum had emerged and been confronted by a man with a glowing sword, Silver had watched. He'd seen the fight. He'd seen Ketchum's tactical brilliance, the way he'd exploited Kalen's divided focus, the coordination with his Pokémon, the strategic mind hidden behind the reputation for reckless improvisation. He'd been impressed despite himself. And then he'd seen her. Not the disguised human woman from the tournament stands. The real Mewtwo, lavender and luminous and terrible, pushing through a divine suppression field through sheer force of will, taking a position between Ash and danger with the absolute certainty of someone who would burn down the world before she let harm reach the person behind her. He'd seen the aftermath. The shaking. The fear. The kiss. Silver sat in the dark and thought about his father. About the files he'd inherited when Giovanni had disappeared, boxes of documents, drives of data, the detritus of an empire built on the exploitation of Pokémon and people alike. He'd read those files with the clinical detachment of someone cataloging evidence of a monster. He'd studied Project Ascension's records and seen Mewtwo listed as Asset M2, Prime, Status, Escaped, Recovery Priority, Maximum. Asset. Not being. Not person. Asset. He pulled out his Pokegear and stared at it. The screen glowed in the dark, waiting. He thought about the Gardevoir hybrid Ash had probably found in the Sylph sublevel. He knew about the tanks, his father's files had referenced them as Stage 2 containment vessels for Generation 2+ subjects. He'd always assumed the subjects were things. Experiments. Products. He thought about the kiss. About the way Mewtwo, Asset M2, Prime, Recovery Priority Maximum, had trembled and broken and been put back together by a boy's hands on her face and 2 words. Then stay. Silver dialed Ash's number. It rang twice. Silver. We need to talk. Silence on the line. Then, about what? About my father's files. About what you found under Sylph Company. About the woman who kissed you in the street. A beat. And about the fact that I think we're on the same side, even though it makes me physically ill to say it. More silence. Silver could hear Ash breathing, could hear the rustle of movement, could hear, faintly, a low, resonant voice in the background saying something he couldn't make out. Tomorrow, Ash said. After the quarterfinals. You still want to battle? You still want to lose? Silver almost smiled. Almost. See you on the field, Ketchum. He hung up. Pocketed the Pokegear. Stared at the city. In his other hand, he held a photograph he'd taken from his father's files years ago and never been able to throw away. It showed a tank, one of the Stage 2 containment vessels, and inside it, curled in blue fluid, a shape that was recognizably Mewtwo but smaller, incomplete, her features half-formed, her eyes closed in something that might have been sleep or might have been suffering. Someone, Giovanni himself, based on the handwriting, had written on the back, "The future belongs to those who dare to create it." Silver crumpled the photograph in his fist and let it fall. The future was going to be different from what his father had planned. He'd make sure of that. 1,400 kilometers away, in a laboratory that existed on no map, Dr. Alara Voss stood before a mirror and did not recognize what looked back. The serum had worked. Of course it had. She'd spent 3 years refining it, testing it on subjects who'd screamed and dissolved and been replaced by new subjects who screamed and dissolved slightly less. Iteration after iteration, failure after failure, until the formula was right. Until it could integrate Mewtwo's harvested DNA into a human host without immediate cellular rejection. Immediate. The key word. The long-term effects were still unknown. But Voss had never been patient enough for certainty. That was both her greatest strength and the thing that would, ultimately, define her legacy. Her left arm had changed first. The skin had shifted from human pink to a pale lavender that deepened to violet at her fingertips. The muscles beneath had reorganized, denser, more efficient, threaded with channels of psychic energy that she could feel like new veins, pulsing with a warmth that was intoxicating. She'd flexed her fingers and watched a coffee cup across the room implode without understanding how she'd done it. Then her eyes. The brown had bled away over hours, replaced by a violet so deep it was almost black. Her vision had changed with it, she could see wavelengths now that no human eye was built to detect. Psychic energy was visible to her, a shimmering overlay on reality that turned the world into a tapestry of light and intention. She could see her assistant's anxiety as a gray nimbus around his head. She could see the hybrid subjects in their tanks as beacons, each one a unique frequency, each one a proof that her work was real and right and necessary. Her mind had expanded. Not gradually, explosively, like a dam breaking, like a sky opening. She could think in parallel now, running multiple streams of analysis simultaneously, processing data at speeds that made her old cognitive capacity seem like a child counting on her fingers. She understood things she hadn't understood yesterday. She saw connections she'd been blind to. She saw the bond between Ash and Mewtwo, the resonance data from the Athorn Valley, the amplification effect, and she understood it with a clarity that was almost religious. The bond wasn't just emotional. It was structural. It rewrote the psychic architecture of both parties, creating a feedback loop of amplification that had no theoretical ceiling. The more they connected, the more powerful they became. Together, they were not additive, they were exponential. That's evolution, she said to her reflection. The woman in the mirror had lavender skin creeping up her neck and violet eyes that glowed in the dim lab light. She was beautiful. She was terrifying. She was more than she had been. Dr. Voss. Thomas, her assistant, stood in the doorway. He was trying very hard not to look at her arm. The resonance data from the saffron incident, I've already processed it. She didn't turn from the mirror. The suppression field weakened both of them, but the bond compensated. They fought at reduced capacity and still drove off an arbiter. Remarkable. What's an arbiter? She ignored the question. Prepare the Generation 5 subjects for field deployment. All of them. Thomas went pale. Paler than usual. All of them. Dr. Voss, the Gen 5s aren't stable enough for combat. Half of them are still in primary integration, then accelerate the integration. Use the primordial energy we've been harvesting from the seal fractures. That energy is unstable. We don't know what it'll do to, it will make them more. She turned from the mirror. In the light, her transformation was stark, half human, half something else, a work in progress that she wore like a crown. The boundary between human and Pokemon is not a law of nature, Thomas. It's a choice made by a god who valued order over potential. Mewtwo is the proof that the boundary can be crossed. Ash Ketchum is the proof that the crossing can be beautiful. Her violet eyes were luminous. Her transformed hand clenched, and across the room, a bank of monitors cracked, screens spiderwebbing simultaneously. "I'm going to show the world what we can become," she said softly. "All of us. And when they see, when they understand, they'll thank me." Thomas said nothing. He turned back to his station and began preparing the Generation 5 subjects for deployment. His hands were shaking. He did not look at the mirror. He had learned, weeks ago, to stop looking at Dr. Voss's eyes. The morning of the quarterfinals dawned gray and heavy, the sky over Saffron City packed with clouds that couldn't decide whether to rain or simply loom. Ash woke to the smell of something that was not burning, which was a pleasant change. Mewtwo was sitting on her bed, cross-legged, holding a cup of tea. She was in her disguise, dark-haired, brown-eyed, human passing, but there was something different about her this morning. A settled quality, a calm that went deeper than her usual controlled composure. She looked like someone who'd found an answer to a question she'd been asking for years and was still getting used to the shape of it. "I purchased tea from the establishment on the ground floor," she said when she saw him looking. "Without incident." Without incident meaning. "The barista made an error with my order." I corrected him verbally rather than psychically. He was appreciative, though confused by my pronunciation of chamomile. Ash sat up. "How did you pronounce it?" "Phonetically." "Which is?" "Chamomile." He pressed his lips together very hard. "That's close. It is correct. The English language is unnecessarily inconsistent. You're not wrong." He swung his legs off the bed. "How are you feeling?" The question wasn't casual. Last night, Kaylin, the kiss, the fear, hung between them like a shared dream, vivid and undeniable. He needed to know where she was. She met his eyes. Even through the disguise, he could feel the intensity of her real gaze beneath. "I am different," she said carefully. "Something has changed in my psychological architecture. I am processing it. Good different or bad different? I believe, good." A pause. "I have a frame of reference now. For the sensation I described to you yesterday, the anomaly. It is no longer anomalous. It is central. To my functioning. To my sense of self." She looked down at her tea. "You are central." It was the most direct, honest, vulnerable thing she'd ever said to him. She said it like a scientist presenting findings, factual, measured, precise, but her hands around the teacup were gripping hard enough to whiten her knuckles. Ash crossed the space between the beds, sat beside her, and put his arm around her shoulders. She went rigid for half a second, then softened, leaning into him with a sigh that seemed to release tension she'd been carrying since the day she was created. "You're central to me too," he said. In case that wasn't obvious. It was becoming apparent. She paused. "Your heart rate data was particularly informative. You need to stop monitoring my heart rate." "I will not." "I know." He kissed the top of her head. Her disguised dark hair smelled like hotel shampoo and ozone. "Come on. I've got a battle to win and a rival to humble. I could simply render him unconscious before the match. Plan B, remember?" "I remember. I maintain that Plan B is superior." The Saffron Convention Center was packed. The quarterfinals had drawn a capacity crowd, 20,000 people filling the stadium seats, their noise rolling down to the battle floor in waves. Holographic displays showed the bracket, 8 trainers remaining, for matches to determine the semi-finalists. Ash vs. Silver was the third bout. Ash stood in the competitor tunnel, rolling his shoulders, running through strategies. Silver's team was well documented, Feraligatr was his anchor, backed by Sneasel, evolved into Weevil in recent years, Crobat, Magneton, Gengar, and a Tyranitar that hit like a natural disaster. Silver favored aggressive openings, high-pressure tactics designed to overwhelm before the opponent could establish rhythm. He was fast, creative, and utterly ruthless. But Ash had watched Silver's earlier matches, and he'd noticed something. Silver telegraphed his switches. Not obviously, it was subtle, a shift in body language, a tightening of his jaw half a second before he recalled a Pokémon. The tell of someone who planned 2 moves ahead and committed hard to his plans. That was a weakness Ash could exploit. Because Ash didn't plan 2 moves ahead. He read the moment, adapted in real time, and made decisions that looked insane until they worked. Trainers, take your positions. The arena floor was standard competition format, flat terrain, no obstacles, 2 trainer boxes at opposite ends. The holographic scoreboard glowed overhead. The crowd roared. Ash walked to his box. Across the field, Silver walked to his. They locked eyes across 60 meters of battle-scarred ground. The referee's flags went up. This is a full 6-on-6 battle. Substitutions are unlimited. The match is over when all 6 Pokémon on one side are unable to battle. Trainers, choose your first Pokémon. Silver moved first. His hand went to his belt with a practiced motion, and the red light of his Pokeball released his Weevil, dark-furred, ice-clawed, fast enough to blur. The crowd murmured appreciatively. Silver opening with speed. Aggressive, as expected. Ash chose Charizard. The crowd erupted. Fire versus ice, power versus speed, the kind of matchup that sold tickets and made highlight reels. Charizard materialized with a roar that shook the arena, wings spread, flame already burning hot and eager. He's going for the type advantage early, the commentator's voice boomed. Ketchum's Charizard against Silver's Weevil, on paper, this should be one-sided. But Silver's Weevil is known for its ability to overcome type disadvantages through sheer speed, Silver smirked. Ice Punch. Don't let it breathe. Weevil blurred. Fast, absurdly fast, crossing the arena in less than a second, ice crystallizing around its claws. It leaped, aiming for Charizard's wing joint, a precision strike designed to cripple rather than damage. Dragon Tail, Ash said calmly. Charizard's tail whipped around, not a brute force swing but a precise, timed counter. Dragon Energy sheathed the tail in blue-green light. The impact caught Weevil mid-leap and launched it, not just backward but out of the fight entirely. Dragon Tail's unique effect activated, the force of the blow didn't just damage, it forced a recall, sending Weevil back to its Pokeball and dragging out a random replacement. Silver's eyes widened. The Pokeball on his belt activated automatically, and Magneton materialized, not by Silver's choice. Dragon Tail had forced the switch. Flamethrower, Ash said, before Magneton had fully formed. Charizard's flame hit the Steel-type dead center. At full power, without setup time, without defensive positioning. Magneton squealed, its metallic body glowing red, and crashed to the ground. Magneton is unable to battle. The crowd went wild. Ash hadn't just won the exchange, he'd eliminated one of Silver's Pokémon in the opening 10 seconds through a move that was technically legal but strategically devastating. Dragon Tail into forced switch into immediate follow-up. Surgical. Silver recalled Magneton. His jaw was tight, but his eyes were calculating, not panicked. He'd lost a piece early, but he was adjusting. The battle that followed was the best the Saffron Crown had seen in years. Silver adapted. He stopped leading aggressive and started playing defensive, using Crobat's speed to harass and chip, using Gengar's Ghost-type immunity to force Ash into unfavorable matchups, using Tyranitar as a wall that could absorb punishment and counter with Earthquake and Stone Edge. He was good. Genuinely, dangerously good. Every time Ash established momentum, Silver found a way to disrupt it. Ash lost Charizard to Tyranitar's Stone Edge, a clean hit that knocked the Fire type out despite Ash's attempt to dodge. He lost Greninja to a Gengar Destiny Bond play that Silver timed with surgical precision. The exchange of Pokémon seesawed back and forth, each loss raising the stakes, each switch a tactical decision with cascading consequences. By the time the battle reached its final phase, both trainers were down to their last Pokémon. Ash, Pikachu. Silver, Feraligatr. The water-type anchored Silver's team, massive, armored in thick scales, powerful enough to crack concrete with a casual aqua tail. Against Pikachu. The crowd was on its feet. The commentators had abandoned analysis for breathless narration. Even the other competitors had gathered to watch. In the stands, Mewtwo sat in her disguise and gripped the armrests of her seat hard enough to dent the metal. She was barely maintaining the illusion. Her real nails, lavender, sharp, were cutting into the aluminum beneath the psychic overlay. She could feel Ash's focus. Through the bond that had been building between them since the Athorn Valley, strengthened by proximity, deepened by the kiss, now a constant warm current between their minds, she felt his tactical awareness as a secondary layer over her own consciousness. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't anxious. He was clear. Every extraneous thought burned away, every ounce of his attention funneled into the 60 meters of battle floor between him and Silver. It was, she realized, the most attractive thing she had ever experienced. Pikachu, agility. Don't engage yet. Pikachu blurred, speed doubling, tripling. Not attacking, positioning, creating options, forcing Feraligatr to track a target it couldn't pin down. Silver read it. Ice beam, sweep the field. Feraligatr opened its jaws and a cone of freezing energy blasted across the arena floor, coating it in ice. The footing changed instantly. Pikachu's speed became a liability on a slick surface. Surf, Silver called, and Feraligatr summoned a wave of water that crested across the frozen field, creating a shifting, treacherous landscape of ice and water. The crowd gasped. Silver was terraforming the battlefield, turning Pikachu's speed advantage into a trap. Ash smiled. Pikachu, Iron Tail into the ice. Anchor yourself. Pikachu's tail flashed silver and drove into the frozen ground like a spike, anchoring the electric mouse to the surface. Stable, immobile, but secure. Now, Thunderbolt. Into the water. The crowd understood a half-second before Silver did. The wave Feraligatr had summoned was still flowing across the field. Water conducts electricity. Pikachu was anchored above it on a pillar of ice. Feraligatr was standing in it. Feraligatr, get out of the, too late. Pikachu's thunderbolt hit the water. 100,000 volts of electricity blazed through the conductive surface in every direction, and Feraligatr, standing knee-deep in its own surf, took the full, unmitigated, amplified force of it. The sound was like a thunderclap inside a cathedral. Light flooded the arena. Feraligatr bellowed, a sound of shock and pain and disbelief, and when the light faded, the water type was down. Smoking faintly. Eyes spiraling. Feraligatr is unable to battle. The winner is Ash Ketchum of Pallet Town. The stadium exploded. Ash crossed the field to Silver. The red-haired trainer was recalling his Feraligatr, his expression locked down tight, every emotion compressed into a thin, hard line. Good match, Ash said. Silver looked at him. For a long moment, nothing. Then, grudgingly, you fight like you have nothing to lose. That's either brave or stupid. Ask me again when you figure out the difference. Silver almost, smiled. I won't forget the dragon tail opening. I'd be disappointed if you did. They stood there, two trainers on a battle-scarred field, surrounded by 20,000 screaming fans, and something shifted between them. Not friendship, neither of them was built for easy friendship. But respect. Earned, reluctant, genuine. After this, Silver said quietly, beneath the crowd noise. We talk. About the files. About the lab. About everything. Tonight. Silver nodded. Turned. Walked to his tunnel without looking back. That evening, in the hotel room, with Pikachu dozing and the city lights painting patterns on the ceiling, Ash lay on his bed and stared at nothing. Mewtwo sat beside him. She'd dropped the disguise. The strain of a full day maintaining it in the psychic noise of the tournament had left her with a headache she described as a sensation I find profoundly objectionable. She was in her true form, lavender and luminous, her white hair loose around her shoulders. "You were extraordinary today," she said. "It was just a battle." "No. It was a statement." She looked at him. "You showed 20,000 people, and silver, who needed to see it most, that power is not the only currency that matters. Strategy, adaptability, the willingness to think in ways your opponent does not expect. That is what makes you dangerous. Not strength. Clarity." He turned his head to look at her. In the dim light, the bioluminescent patterns beneath her skin pulsed in slow, steady rhythms. He'd started to recognize them. Fast meant stress or excitement, slow meant calm, irregular meant she was processing something emotionally complex. Right now, they were slow. She was calm. Settled. Present. "Come here," he said. She lay down beside him. Stiffly at first, the bed was a human invention she still found conceptually unnecessary, but when he put his arm around her, she softened against him with that same quiet sigh, her head finding the hollow of his shoulder like it had been designed to fit there. "I have been considering the name question," she said. "Yeah. I find that I cannot select a name for myself. The concept of self-naming implies a self-understanding that I am still developing." She paused. "I would prefer if you chose one. That's a big responsibility. You have demonstrated competence with significant responsibilities." He thought about it. Let names pass through his mind, some human, some not, some from languages he'd encountered in his travels. He thought about who she was. What she meant. The way she looked in moonlight, like something caught between worlds, belonging to neither, beautiful in both. "Mira," he said. She was quiet. "Mira," she repeated, testing the shape of it. "What does it mean?" "Depends on the language. In some, it means wonderful. In others, peace. In one I heard in Kalos, it means one who looks outward." "One who looks outward," she murmured. "As opposed to inward. You've spent your whole life looking inward. Analyzing yourself, questioning yourself, wondering if you deserve to exist." He tightened his arm around her. "Maybe it's time to look outward. See what's out here. See who's here with you." She was quiet for a long time. Her bioluminescent patterns flickered, fast, slow, processing, feeling, deciding. "Mira," she said again. And this time there was something in her voice, a warmth, a homecoming, that told him the name had found its place. "I like it," she said quietly. "I like it very much." He kissed her forehead. She closed her eyes. For the first time in her existence, behind the lids, the darkness wasn't empty. It was warm, and it smelled like campfire and chamomile, and it sounded like a heartbeat that wasn't hers but that she'd started to think of as home. Outside, the clouds finally decided, rain. It came down in sheets, washing the city clean, running through gutters and flooding storm drains, drumming on windows with the steady, rhythmic patience of the world doing what it had always done. Beneath the city, in a laboratory that existed on no map, Dr. Alara Voss opened the Generation 5 containment pods and began feeding them primordial energy harvested from the cracks in reality. The subjects, 24 of them, stronger and more stable than anything she'd created before, screamed as the dark energy flooded into their cells, rewriting their genetic architecture, pushing them past the boundaries of what flesh was meant to contain. Then they stopped screaming. Then they opened their eyes. In Sinnoh, at the peak of Spear Pillar, the ancient floor split. The crack ran from one end of the sacred site to the other, and through it, tendrils of dark energy, thicker now, more purposeful, almost aware, reached upward. Dialga and Palkia, guardians of time and space, roared in distress, a sound that echoed across dimensions, heard by every legendary Pokémon on the planet. Something was waking up. Something that had been patient for eternities. Something that no longer needed to wait much longer. In a hotel room in Saffron City, a woman who had just learned her own name slept for the first time in her life, held by a man who taught her that she was worth holding. And in her dreams, the first dream she'd ever had, she saw a darkness vast and ancient and hungry, and she stood between it and the light, and she was not afraid. Because she was not alone. Chapter 3, The Reckoning. The world started breaking at dawn. Ash felt it before he saw it, a tremor that ran through the hotel floor like a shiver through skin, too deep and too wrong to be an earthquake. Pikachu shrieked awake. The windows rattled in their frames. The water glass on the nightstand danced sideways and fell, shattering on the floor. Mira was on her feet before the tremor ended, her disguise gone, her true form blazing with violet light. Her eyes were wide, not with fear, but with the overwhelming flood of psychic input that was crashing through her mental defenses like a wave through a paper wall. What is it? Ash was already up, already reaching for his belt. Everything, she said. Her voice was strained, harmonic resonance cracking at the edges. Every sealed site on the planet, simultaneously. The barriers are failing. She raised her hand, and the air between them shimmered. A psychic projection materialized, a globe of light, rotating slowly, with points of angry red pulsing across its surface like infected wounds. Ash counted them. 7. 12. 20. More appearing as he watched, spreading across Kanto, Johto, Sinnoh, Hoenn, Unova, every region, every ancient site, every place where the boundary between what was and what had been sealed away was thinnest. The pokegear on the nightstand buzzed. Then buzzed again. Then didn't stop buzzing, message after message flooding in, the notification light strobing like a distress signal. Ash grabbed it. Lance, global emergency. All League forces mobilizing. Ancient sites breaching across every region. Legendary Pokémon in distress. Get to safety. Professor Oak, Ash, the tree of beginning is hemorrhaging energy. Mew has been screaming for 6 hours. Something is terribly wrong. Sabrina, the psychic web is on fire. Every telepath in Saffron is incapacitated. Whatever's happening, the epicenter is moving toward us. And then one more. A number he didn't recognize. A message that was 3 words long, she is coming. Ash stared at it. Mira. Voss. I know. Her projection shifted, zooming in on a point southeast of Saffron City, a concentration of energy signatures, moving fast, moving together. 24 hybrid signatures. Enhanced beyond anything in her previous data. And at the center, the projection flickered, destabilized. Myra's expression tightened. She has changed. Her psychic signature is wrong. Partially human, partially mine, partially something I do not recognize. She has been using the primordial energy. The dark energy from the cracks. Yes. She has been harvesting it. Feeding it to her subjects. And to herself. Myra's hands clenched. She is accelerating the collapse deliberately. She believes she can control the transition, guide the dissolution of the boundary into something she can shape. Can she? No. The primordial is not a tool. It is entropy given awareness. She is feeding a fire and calling herself its master. Ash's phone buzzed one more time. Silver. Lobby. 5 minutes. Bring her. Silver was waiting by the elevator bank when they came down, dressed in black, his Pokémon belt fully loaded, a leather satchel over one shoulder that looked heavy with paper and data drives. His expression was the controlled blankness of someone who'd already processed the emergency, run the calculations, and arrived at the part where decisions needed to be made. He saw Mira, undisguised, lavender-skinned and violet-eyed, her white hair stirring with psychic energy, and his jaw tightened. But he didn't flinch. He looked at her the way he'd look at a thunderstorm, with respect, wariness, and the understanding that pretending it wasn't there would be idiotic. "So that's what my father spent 1,000,000,000 credits on," he said. Among other pleasantries, Mira replied coolly. "You have your father's eyes. Don't ever say that to me again. Then do not look at me as though I am an asset to be evaluated." They held each other's gaze for 3 hostile seconds. Then Silver broke it, turning to Ash. "The files," he said, dropping the satchel on a lobby table. "Everything my father had on Project Ascension. I've been sitting on this for years because I didn't trust anyone enough to share it. I still don't. But people are dying, the sky is apparently falling, and I'd rather be wrong about you than right about doing nothing." Ash opened the satchel. Files, drives, photographs, the documentation of a madman's ambition, catalogued with the meticulous care of someone who believed he was building an empire. He spread them out and started reading. Mira leaned over his shoulder, scanning pages at a speed that would have been impossible for human eyes. Her expression shifted as she read, from clinical interest to dawning recognition to something cold and terrible. "He knew," she said. "Giovanni knew about the primordial." "What?" Ash looked up. She pulled a document from the pile, old, handwritten, marked with symbols that matched the ones Ash had seen on the fangs in the Athorn Valley. "This is a translation of ancient unowned script recovered from the ruins of Ulf. It describes a force sealed away before Arceus shaped the world, a chaos that existed in the space between categories. Between human and Pokemon. Between self and other. Between order and dissolution." She kept reading, her violet eyes moving across the text with increasing intensity. The seal was created by Arceus using the fundamental distinction between species as its foundation. As long as human remained human and Pokemon remained Pokemon, as long as the boundary held, the seal held. But Giovanni theorized that a being who existed on both sides of the boundary could serve as either a key or a lock. "A key to open it," Silver said, "or a lock to reinforce it." "Yes." Myra's voice was quiet. "That is why I was made humanoid. Not for infiltration. Not for combat. I was designed to be a tool for manipulating the seal itself. Giovanni wanted to threaten the seal, to crack it just enough to harness the primordial's energy without releasing it. Controlled chaos. Power without consequence." "Sounds like dear old Dad," Silver muttered. But he was wrong about one variable. Mira set down the document. He assumed the being on the boundary would be a tool, controllable, programmable, obedient. He did not account for the possibility that a being of both natures might develop genuine consciousness. Genuine will. Genuine, she looked at Ash. Connection. "The bond," Ash said. "The bond." She nodded. "It was never supposed to happen. A weapon does not love. A tool does not choose. But I am neither, and I did both, and now the boundary between human and Pokemon is not just blurred by my existence, it is being rewritten by our connection. And that's why the seal is failing. That is why the seal is changing." Her eyes were intense, urgent. "There is a difference, Ash. The old seal was built on separation, keeping things apart. Our bond is creating something new. Not separation, not dissolution, but integration. A way for two different things to connect without losing themselves. The seal is not failing because we are destroying it. It is failing because it was never designed for what we are becoming." The implications settled over them like a weight. "So we're not the problem," Ash said slowly. "We are the solution. If we can reshape the seal, rebuild it around our bond rather than against it, you can reinforce the boundary. Not by separating human and Pokemon, but by proving they can connect without collapsing into each other." "Yes." Silver looked between them. "That's a beautiful theory. What happens when the thing on the other side of the seal doesn't want to cooperate?" The building shook again. Harder this time. Plaster dust rained from the ceiling. Somewhere in the city, a siren began to wail, then another, then a dozen, the sound rising into a chorus of alarm that echoed off the glass towers and concrete canyons. Ash's poke-ear buzzed. Lance again. Voss is approaching Saffron City with an army of hybrids. ETA 30 minutes. League forces are en route but won't arrive in time. Ash, if Mewtwo is what you say she is, we need her. The city needs her. Now. Ash pocketed the phone. He looked at Mira. He looked at Silver. 30 minutes, he said. Voss is coming with 24 enhanced hybrids and whatever she's turned herself into. The League's too far away. The city's got Sabrina, the gym trainers, and whatever local forces can mobilize. And us, Silver said. And us. Ash pulled on his jacket, settled Pikachu on his shoulder, and felt the familiar weight of his Pokeballs on his belt, Charizard, Lucario, Greninja, Sceptile, all of them. Partners. Friends. The team he'd built across years and regions and countless battles. Mira, can you coordinate with Sabrina? Link the psychic trainers into a network, give them tactical awareness of the incoming force. Yes. But if I extend myself that far, I will be less effective in direct combat. I know. Do it anyway. We need the city's defenders working as a unit, not individual fighters. She hesitated, the instinct to stay close to him, to be his shield, warring with the tactical logic of his request. He saw the struggle play out across her features in the space of a heartbeat. I will be within range, she said. It wasn't a compromise, it was a promise. I know you will. He touched her hand. Brief, warm, enough. Silver, I need you on the eastern approach. That's where the hybrids will hit first based on their trajectory. Take your team and anyone you can rally from the tournament competitors. Silver blinked. You want me to lead a defense? I want you to do what you're good at, fight hard, fight smart, and make the other guy wish they'd picked a different city to invade. Something shifted in Silver's expression. Not warmth, he wasn't built for warmth. But something adjacent to it. Recognition, maybe. The understanding that someone saw him clearly and chose to trust him anyway. Don't die, Ketchum, Silver said. I haven't gotten my rematch yet. Wouldn't dream of it. Silver grabbed his satchel and headed for the door. At the threshold, he paused. The name, he said, glancing back at Mira. What do I call her? Mira, Ash said. Silver looked at the lavender-skinned woman who had been his father's obsession, his family's darkest legacy, and a living reminder of everything Giovanni had done wrong. He nodded once. Mira, he repeated. Then he was gone. The next 20 minutes were controlled chaos. Ash moved through Saffron City like a current through a circuit, organizing, directing, making decisions at a speed that left people blinking in his wake. He found Sabrina at her gym. The psychic-type gym leader was already mobilizing, her face pale with the strain of the psychic disturbances but her eyes sharp and focused. When Mira reached out to her telepathically, Sabrina's reaction was immediate and professional. Mewtwo, she said flatly. Well. That explains the anomalous readings I've been suppressing for the past 2 days. I require access to your psychic network, Mira said, standing in the gym's meditation chamber. I can link every psychic trainer in the city into a shared tactical awareness. They will see what I see. They will know what's coming. Sabrina studied her. That level of psychic integration could burn out a human mind. I will regulate the flow. I have more control than I used to. A pause. And more reason to be careful with human minds. Sabrina glanced at Ash. Whatever she saw in his face, his certainty, his trust, the quiet steel beneath the kindness, seemed to satisfy her. Do it, she said. Mira closed her eyes and reached. The psychic web of Saffron City was a delicate thing, a network of minds, human and Pokemon alike, connected by threads of telepathic energy that carried information, emotion, awareness. Sabrina had built it over years, a masterwork of psychic architecture. Mira didn't take it over. She enhanced it, pouring her own power into the existing structure, widening the channels, deepening the connections, turning a web into a net that covered the entire city. Every psychic trainer in Saffron felt it. A sudden expansion of awareness, a clarity of perception that was startling in its depth. They could feel each other, positions, readiness, intention. They could feel the city around them. And at the edge of their expanded awareness, approaching fast from the southeast, they could feel them. 24 points of hybrid energy, burning like dark stars. And at their center, something larger. Something that blazed with a power that was half familiar and half alien, a grotesque mirror of the consciousness linking them all. Voss. They'll hit the Saffron Gate district first, Ash said, standing at the gym's tactical display, a psychic projection Sabrina maintained that showed the city layout in real time. Mira, relay to Silver, eastern approach, confirmed. Sabrina, I need your gym trainers at the northern and southern choke points. If any hybrids break through Silver's line, they need to be channeled, not scattered. And you? Sabrina asked. Center. The convention center plaza is the largest open space in the city. That's where Voss will want to make her statement. She's not just attacking, she's performing. She wants an audience. How do you know that? Because she sent a dying hybrid to fight Mira for combat data. She recorded it. Analyzed it. She's a scientist first, everything is an experiment. And this, he gestured at the city around them, is her thesis defense. The first hybrid hit Silver's defensive line at 8:47 a.m. It came out of the sky, a massive, winged shape that combined dragonite and human anatomy into something that should have been majestic but was instead terrifying. Its body was stable, Voss's Generation 5 engineering, enhanced by primordial energy, but its eyes burned with a darkness that had nothing to do with the creature's own consciousness. It screamed, and the scream carried frequencies that made the air itself vibrate. Silver met it with Tyranitar. The impact shook the street. Tyranitar caught the hybrid's dive with a stone edge that erupted from the pavement in a wall of sharpened rock, forcing the creature to pull up and circle. Silver's commands were rapid, precise, ruthless, his Pokémon moved as extensions of his will, covering each other, creating kill zones, exploiting every opening. But more were coming. Through the Saffron Gate, pouring in like a dark tide, hybrids of every type and size. A Scyther-human hybrid that moved faster than the eye could track. A Golem hybrid that crashed through a building wall without slowing down. Smaller forms, Eevee hybrids, Pico hybrids, things that looked almost like children until you saw the power crackling behind their eyes and the wrongness in the way they moved. Silver's tournament competitors, 8 of them, trainers who'd been competing for a trophy 48 hours ago and were now fighting for a city, formed up around him. Their Pokémon filled the street, a wall of fire, ice, steel, and fury. Hold the line. Silver shouted. Nothing gets past this block. Push them back or put them down. Through the psychic network, Mira fed them tactical data, hybrid positions, attack patterns, weaknesses. The information arrived not as words but as knowing, a sudden, intuitive understanding of where to strike, when to dodge, how to coordinate. The defenders moved like a single organism, covering gaps, exploiting openings, their individual skills woven into something greater. It was working. The line held. Hybrids were driven back, contained, overwhelmed by coordinated fire from multiple trainers. Then Voss arrived. She walked through the Saffron Gate like she owned it. The hybrids parted around her, not out of fear, but deference. She'd changed since the files Ash had seen. The transformation had progressed, her left arm was fully converted, lavender and muscular, crackling with psychic energy. The discoloration had spread up her neck to her jaw, giving her face an asymmetric quality, half human, half something else. Her eyes were solid violet, no whites, no pupils. Her lab coat was gone, replaced by what looked like psychic energy woven into a second skin, similar to Myra's, but darker, shot through with veins of black that pulsed with primordial energy. She was broadcasting. Every psychic in the city could feel it, her thoughts, her intentions, her manifesto, projected with the force of a stadium loudspeaker directly into the minds of every conscious being within range. The boundary between human and Pokemon is a lie. A cage built by a god who feared what we could become together. Look at me, I am the proof. I am both. I am more. And I am offering you the same gift. Evolution is not a choice, it is an inevitability. I am simply removing the delay. Ash stood in the convention center plaza and watched her approach on Myra's psychic feed. He could feel the broadcast pressing against his mind, seductive, certain, backed by a power that made the words feel like truth even when his gut knew they were poison. She's convincing, he murmured. She is delusional, Mira said beside him. She was maintaining the citywide network while simultaneously preparing for combat, her consciousness split across dozens of channels. The strain showed, subtle tremors in her hands, a tightness around her eyes. She mistakes control for understanding. She has primordial energy inside her, Ash. Inside her subjects. It is not a tool, it is a corruption. The longer they carry it, the less of their original consciousness remains. The hybrids, are they aware? Are they people? Mira was silent for a beat too long. Some of them were. The primordial energy is, rewriting them. Their original minds are being overwritten by something older. Something that wants the boundary gone not for evolution, but for dissolution. So Voss thinks she's leading an army, and the army is actually a delivery system for a force that will consume her along with everything else. Ash absorbed this. The picture was clear now, and it was worse than he'd imagined. Voss wasn't just a threat, she was a vector. A carrier for something that was using her vision of evolution as camouflage for annihilation. Can we reach her? Get through to the person underneath? Myra's expression was complicated. I do not know. The transformation is advanced. But she is not fully consumed, not yet. There is still a human mind in there, still a scientist, still a woman who believes she is doing something beautiful. She paused. Whether that makes her more dangerous or less, I cannot say. Guess we'll find out. Voss hit the plaza like a storm. She didn't attack directly, she demonstrated. The pavement beneath her feet rippled and reformed, stone flowing like water, reshaping itself into a raised platform. She stood atop it, arms spread, violet eyes blazing, and the air around her shimmered with psychic force that bent light and warped sound. Mewtwo. Her voice carried across the plaza, amplified by power rather than technology. I know you're here. I know you're protecting him. Come out and face what I've become, face what you could become, if you'd stop hiding behind a boy and embrace what you are. Mira stepped into the plaza. She didn't hurry. She didn't grandstand. She simply walked out of the shadow of the convention center and stood in the open, lavender skin catching the gray morning light, white hair moving in psychic currents, violet eyes fixed on the woman who had designed her second body and now wore a twisted reflection of it. You were brilliant once, Elara, Mira said. Her voice was calm, carrying the same natural resonance it always did, no amplification, no projection. Just presence. The mind that designed my genetic architecture was extraordinary. Perhaps the finest scientific mind of its generation. Was. Voss's smile was wide and wrong, too many teeth showing, the muscles of her transformed jaw not quite mapping to human expression anymore. I am more than I was. More than you, perhaps. The same DNA, the same potential, but I chose to embrace it, while you chose to play house with a trainer and pretend you're something you're not. I am not pretending. You're wearing a leash and calling it love. Voss's eyes shifted to Ash, standing behind Mira with Pikachu on his shoulder and his hand on his belt. He's the variable, isn't he? The resonance amplifier. I've seen the data, your psychic output increases by 16% in his presence. 16%. The bond is literally rewriting your neural architecture. She laughed, a sound that crackled with harmonic distortion. And you think that's romance? It's biology. Stimulus and response. I could replicate it in a laboratory. You could not, Mira said quietly. Because you do not understand what it is. Enlighten me. It is a choice. Every moment, every day, I choose him. Not because my DNA compels it. Not because my architecture demands it. Because he saw a weapon and treated it as a person. Because he held my hand when I was afraid. Because he gave me a name. Myra's psychic energy flared, not aggressively, not as a display of power, but as an expression of something deeper. An emotional truth made visible. You cannot replicate choice, Elara. You cannot engineer faith. You can only experience it, and you never have, because you have never trusted anything enough to be vulnerable to it. The words landed. Ash saw them hit, saw the flinch that ran through Vasa's transformed body, the micro-expression of pain that crossed her asymmetric face before the primordial energy surging through her drowned in certainty. Sentiment, Vas spat. The refuge of the limited. Let me show you what power looks like. She attacked. The psychic blast that erupted from Vasa's hands was nothing Mira had felt before, not pure psychic energy, but a fusion of psychic force and primordial corruption, dark-veined and writhing, carrying within it a dissolution effect that didn't just damage but unraveled. It hit the pavement and the stone didn't break, it lost coherence, molecules separating, solid matter becoming dust becoming nothing. Mira deflected it. Barely. The effort cost her, her barrier flickered, the strain of maintaining the citywide psychic network while simultaneously fighting at full capacity pushing her toward limits she hadn't known she had. Ash, I cannot maintain the network and fight her at the same time. Drop the network. The defenders can handle themselves. Silver's got the line. Sabrina's coordinating. They don't need you for that anymore. He stepped up beside her, Pikachu leaping from his shoulder, cheeks blazing. They need you here. Mira released the network. Across the city, the enhanced awareness dimmed, but it didn't vanish. Sabrina caught the threads and held them, weaker than Myra's version but functional. The city's defenders continued to fight. And Mira, freed from the burden of 1,000 minds, turned the full force of her attention on Vas. The battle that followed tore through Saffron City like a natural disaster. Two psychic powerhouses, one born from science and choice, one from science and ambition, collided with a force that shattered windows for 6 blocks. Telekinetic blasts cratered streets. Psychic barriers materialized and broke like glass. Mira and Vas moved through the city in a running battle that left devastation in its wake, not because Mira was careless, but because Vas was. Vas didn't care about collateral damage. She threw cars at Mira. She collapsed building facades. She ripped up streetlights and used them as telekinetic javelins. Each attack was designed to force Mira into a choice, dodge and let the city take the hit, or block and absorb the force. Mira blocked. Every time. Every car caught and set down. Every falling wall held until civilians could run. Every javelin stopped in midair and laid aside. She fought Vas while simultaneously protecting a city of 200,000 people, and the dual burden was grinding her down. Stop shielding them. Vas screamed, her voice distorted by primordial energy. Stop wasting yourself on their weakness. You are a god, Mewtwo, act like one. Gods who do not protect are not worth the title, Mira replied, and caught a chunk of masonry the size of a car before it hit a crowd of fleeing civilians. Ash was there. He wasn't fighting Vas, he wasn't that arrogant, but he was everywhere else. Charizard pulled civilians from a collapsing building. Greninja created water barriers to contain fires sparked by psychic detonations. Lucario's aura sense guided people through debris-choked streets to safety. And Pikachu, small, fast, fearless, ran interference on Vasa's attacks, delivering thunderbolts that didn't hurt the transformed scientist but distracted her, disrupted her aim, bought Mira precious seconds. Every time Ash cleared a danger zone, Mira had one less thing to protect. Every civilian evacuated was one less shield she had to maintain. He was systematically removing her constraints, freeing her to fight. She felt it, through the bond, through the warm current of connection that ran between them regardless of distance or distraction. His tactical mind, his absolute refusal to let anyone be collateral, his steady, unwavering presence at the edge of her awareness saying I'm here, I've got this, focus on her. The amplification effect kicked in. Not the 16% Voss had measured, more. Much more. The bond between them wasn't just psychic proximity, it was trust, it was partnership, it was two beings who had chosen each other operating in perfect synchronization. Myra's power didn't just increase, it clarified. Every ability became sharper, more precise, more controlled. She stopped playing defense. Mira closed the distance with a teleport that crossed 50 meters in a blink and hit Voss with a concentrated psychic lance that punched through the scientist's barrier and sent her skidding backward across the plaza. Voss caught herself, snarling, and counterattacked, a wave of primordial energy that rolled forward like a black tide. Mira didn't block it. She split it, her psychic energy forming a wedge that divided the wave around her, the dark energy flowing past on either side and dissipating against a barrier she'd placed behind her to catch the runoff. The technique was elegant, precise, and something Vasa's combat data had never accounted for. How? Vasa's transformed face contorted. Your output has increased by over 30% since our engagement began. That's impossible without, she looked past Mira. At Ash, standing in the cleared plaza, Pikachu on his shoulder, his Pokémon arrayed around him, every civilian gone. He met Vasa's gaze without flinching. The bond, Voss breathed. It's still growing. It's not static, it scales. The deeper the trust, the higher the output. Her violet eyes widened with something that was half rage and half scientific ecstasy. You're not just amplifying her. You're completing her. That's extraordinary. That's love, Elara, Mira said. You were looking for a variable. It was always this simple. Voss screamed. Not a battle cry, something more primal, more anguished, the sound of a woman watching her life's work be reduced to something she couldn't replicate because she'd never experienced it. The primordial energy inside her surged in response, dark veins spreading across her skin, her transformation accelerating as her emotional control fractured. Simple. You think this is simple? She launched herself at Mira, physically, psychically, everything she had, a tsunami of power and rage and wounded pride. I gave my life to this work. I sacrificed everything, my career, my humanity, my body, to bridge the gap between species, and you did it by accident. By falling for a boy. Their powers collided. The shockwave flattened everything in a 50-meter radius, street signs, light poles, vendor carts, all of it swept outward like leaves in a gale. Mira caught Vasa's wrists, physical contact, deliberate, intimate, and held on. Not by accident, she said, her voice straining against the pressure of Vasa's assault. By choosing. Every day. Every moment. I chose to stay. I chose to trust. I chose to let someone see me, truly see me, and not run from what they found. She tightened her grip. You never made that choice, Elara. Not once. You poured yourself into your work because it was safer than pouring yourself into a person. And now you're drowning in your own creation because there's nothing inside you to hold on to. Vasa's eyes, solid violet, no trace of humanity, flickered. Deep beneath the primordial energy, deep beneath the transformation, something heard those words and flinched. Mira pressed the opening. She did what she'd refused to do to anyone since Ash had asked her not to, she reached into Voss's mind. But not to attack. Not to control. To show. She showed Voss what Subject Theta had felt when it died. The confusion. The pain. The exhaustion of existing as something the world had no category for. And then the end, the moment when Mira had held it, and the fear had eased, and the last thing Theta had known was that it was not alone. She showed Voss the tanks beneath Sylph Company. The keening. The half-formed bodies. The Gardevoir hybrid pressing her hand against the glass and mouthing a word that could have meant save me or end me or simply see me. She showed Voss what it felt like to be created. To wake up in a world that saw you as a product. To look for your own face in a mirror and find only a serial number. Voss buckled. Her knees hit the ground. The psychic assault faltered, primordial energy sputtering and surging erratically as her concentration shattered. Tears ran down her face, one track from a human eye, one from a transformed one, and her mouth opened in a silent cry that had nothing to do with power and everything to do with the sudden, devastating understanding that she had become the thing she'd most despised. I didn't, her voice cracked. Human, small, stripped of amplification and authority. I was trying to help. I was trying to make us better. I know, Mira said. And she meant it. Because she could see it now, the original intent, buried beneath years of compromise and ambition and escalating commitment to a path that had lost its way so gradually that Voss had never noticed the ground shifting beneath her feet. A woman who had started with a genuine vision and ended as a monster, and who was only now seeing the trajectory clearly. It hurts, Voss whispered. The primordial energy inside her was still writhing, still pushing, still trying to consume what was left of her human mind. It hurts so much. It won't stop. It wants things, I know. Myra's hands shifted from restraint to support, holding Voss's arms, keeping her upright. I know what it is to carry something inside you that wants to consume everything. I know what it is to be defined by what others put into you instead of what you choose. Ash was there. He'd crossed the plaza during the psychic exchange, moving on instinct and the bond's guidance, arriving at the moment he was needed. He looked at Voss, broken, weeping, half-transformed, the primordial energy eating her alive, and he saw what Mira saw. Not a villain. A person. A person who'd gone wrong in a way that was catastrophic and real and deeply, terribly human. Can you stabilize her? He asked Mira. If I suppress the primordial energy in her cells, it will not be permanent, it will continue to consume her without ongoing treatment. But I can buy time. Do it. Mira pressed her hands to Voss's temples. Violet light flared, clean, bright, the psychic energy of a being who had chosen what she was rather than being consumed by what she was made to be. It pushed into Voss's system, wrapping around the dark tendrils of primordial energy and compressing them, not destroying but containing, buying the woman inside a reprieve from the force that was devouring her. Voss gasped. Her eyes flickered, violet to brown, brown to violet, settling on something in between. The transformation didn't reverse, but it stopped advancing. She sagged in Myra's grip, breathing hard. The subjects, Voss whispered. My Gen 5s. The primordial energy, it's in all of them. When I lose control, across the city, the hybrid army went berserk. Without Voss's directing intelligence, the primordial energy in their cells had nothing to regulate it. They stopped fighting the defenders with strategy and started fighting with hunger, an indiscriminate, consuming need to destroy boundaries, dissolve distinctions, unmake the order of the world. Silver's defensive line buckled. Through Sabrina's diminished psychic network, Ash felt the chaos, trainers overwhelmed, Pokémon struggling against enemies that no longer felt pain or fear, the Eastern District descending into a war zone. Mira, the hybrids, I feel them. Her face was drawn, the strain of suppressing Voss's primordial energy while sensing the citywide crisis pulling her in multiple directions. I can suppress them, but I would have to release Voss. And I cannot do both. Silver can hold. Sabrina can coordinate. Do what you can. He looked at Voss. Can you call them off? Voss's transformed face twisted with effort. She reached out, psychically, desperately, but the connection to her subjects was fraying, the primordial energy in them resisting her commands, overriding her control protocols with its own imperative. They're not listening to me anymore, she said, and the horror in her voice was genuine. They never were. I thought I was commanding them, but it was using me to position them. The whole army, the whole attack, it wasn't my plan. It was bait. Ash went cold. Bait for what? The answer came from the sky. The crack opened above Saffron City like a wound in the world. Not a fissure, a tear, a vertical rip in reality that extended from the rooftops to the upper atmosphere, pulsing with a darkness that wasn't the absence of light but the presence of something worse. Something before light. Before order. Before the distinction between one thing and another had meaning. The primordial. It didn't emerge so much as seep, a formless, lightless pressure that poured through the tear and spread across the sky like ink in water. Where it passed, colors bleached. Sounds flattened. The boundary between solid and liquid, between air and earth, between one moment and the next, began to soften. Buildings at the edge of the tear's shadow started to run, their sharp edges dissolving, their materials losing coherence. And beneath the tear, the hybrid army stopped fighting. They stood motionless, their eyes, every one of them, turning upward. The primordial energy in their cells sang in resonance with the thing above, and they became conduits, channels through which the force of dissolution could flow more freely into the world. Mira looked up at the tear and felt something she hadn't felt since the night Kalen's suppression field had diminished her. Fear. Pure, fundamental, existential fear. Because the thing above her wasn't an enemy. It wasn't a being with will and intention and weakness. It was entropy. The natural state of the universe before Arceus had imposed order. It didn't want to destroy, it wanted to undo. To return everything to the undifferentiated chaos from which it had been shaped. It was the ocean, and reality was a sandcastle, and the tide was coming in. Ash, she said. Her voice was steady. Her hands were not. I need you to understand what we are facing. I see it. You see the manifestation. What's behind it is worse. It is the dissolution of categories. Of boundaries. Of the distinction between self and other. If it succeeds, there will be no human, no Pokemon, no you, no me. Only, everything. All at once. Without structure. Without meaning. Without identity. Without identity. Ash looked at the tear. At the dissolving buildings. At the motionless hybrids. At the city he'd sworn to protect and the woman he'd chosen to love, both of them standing in the shadow of something that made every enemy he'd ever faced look like a playground disagreement. Then we don't let it succeed, he said. Ash, we don't let it succeed. He took her hand. You said we're the solution. The bond, our bond, it's not dissolution. It's integration. Two things connecting without losing themselves. That's what the seal needs to be. Not separation. Connection. In theory, in practice. Right here. Right now. He squeezed her hand. You and me, Mira. Like we've been doing since the valley. I trust you. Do you trust me? She looked at him. This boy, this man, who'd walked into crossfire at 11 because his heart wouldn't let him stand aside. Who'd held her hand when she was shaking and told her to stay. Who'd given her a name, and soup, and the first night of sleep she'd ever known. With everything I am, she said. Golden light blazed from the east. Kalen came out of the sky like a falling star, divine energy trailing behind him in streamers of warm, ancient light, his blade drawn and blazing with the full force of Arceus's mandate. He hit the primordial's leading edge and cut, the golden blade cleaving through the darkness, burning it, pushing it back. For 5 seconds, it worked. Divine light versus primordial dark, order against chaos, the will of a god enacted through a mortal vessel. Kalen fought with the skill of centuries and the power of a divine inheritance, his blades singing through the air, each stroke a declaration that the world would maintain its form. Then the primordial noticed him. A tendril of darkness, thick, purposeful, aware, lashed out. Kalen dodged, cut, dodged again. But the tendrils multiplied, coming from every direction, and the primordial learned. It didn't need to overpower him. It just needed to unmake his blade. The golden light flickered as the primordial pressed against it, testing the divine energy, finding the frequencies that interfered, adapting. Kalen's blade cracked. The sound was like a bell breaking, a pure, sorrowful tone that carried across the city and made every living thing that heard it flinch. The golden light stuttered. Kalen fell, not gracefully, not dramatically, but the way a man falls when the ground he's standing on gives way. He hit the plaza hard, rolled, and came up on one knee with blood on his face and his blade in 2 pieces. The primordial surged, pressing through the gap Kalen had been holding, the tear widening, the dissolution spreading. Ash ran to him. Kalen looked up. His face was battered, his divine light flickering, his calm shattered. For the first time, Ash saw the man beneath the mandate, someone who'd been given a mission by a god and had just discovered that the mission was impossible. "I was wrong," Kalen said. The words cost him, Ash could see it. "Destroying her, separating you, it would not have stopped this. The primordial was always going to wake. The seal was always going to fail. It was built on separation, and separation was never going to hold forever." He looked at Mira, standing behind Ash, violet and luminous and terrified. "She is not the weakness. She is the bridge." "I know," Ash said. "A being of both natures, bonded to a human through genuine connection, she can reinforce the boundary, but not the old boundary. A new one. One built on integration rather than division." He coughed. Blood on his lips. "I understand now. Arceus didn't make a mistake in allowing her to exist. Arceus was adapting. The old seal was failing. She is the new one. How do we do it?" Kalen pressed his broken blade into Ash's hand. The golden light, dim, fading, pulsed against his palm. "The blade carries the authority. Not the power, that was always mine, and it was not enough. The authority. The right to reshape the seal. Give it to her. Let her channel it through the bond. Let you both," he coughed again. Harder. "Kalen, I've held this mandate for 400 years. The Arbiter's voice was fading. I never once questioned it. Perhaps I should have." He looked at Mira with something that Ash recognized, against all odds, as respect. "Guard him well." "I need no instruction in that," Mira said, and her voice shook, and it was the most genuine thing Ash had ever heard her say to someone who wasn't him. Kalen smiled. It was a tired, peaceful, human smile. He closed his eyes. The golden light left him, not violently, not painfully. It just went. Poured out of his body like water from a tipped cup, flowing into the broken blade in Ash's hand, concentrating there, waiting. Kalen's body relaxed. His breathing steadied. He wasn't dead, just mortal. A man, lying on broken pavement, with 400 years of duty finally lifted from his shoulders. Silver appeared, running, his team battered but intact, tournament trainers behind him. He took one look at the tear in the sky, at Kalen on the ground, at Ash holding a broken golden blade, and said, "What do you need?" "Keep the city alive," Ash said. "Buy us time." "How much time?" Ash looked at Mira. She looked at the tear. At the primordial pouring through it, spreading, dissolving, unmaking. "Enough," she said. Silver nodded. He didn't ask for details. He didn't need them. He turned to the trainers behind him, a dozen of them, bruised, exhausted, scared, and became, in that moment, something his father had never been. A leader who gave a damn. Everyone with me. Flying types, get eyes on the dissolution zone, guide civilians out. Ground types, structural support on the buildings at the perimeter, hold them together. Psychic types, link with Sabrina, coordinate. He looked back at Ash one more time. Don't you dare lose. Then he was gone, running toward the chaos, shouting commands, and the trainers followed him because his voice left no room for the possibility that they wouldn't. Ash and Mira stood in the plaza. Above them, the tear pulsed. The primordial spread. The world softened at the edges. Give me the blade, Mira said. Ash pressed it into her hands. The golden light flared when she touched it, reacting to her hybrid nature, to the psychic power that ran through her, to the divine authority it carried, recognizing that she was exactly what it had been waiting for. Her eyes widened. I can feel it. The seal, the whole structure. It's everywhere. Woven into the fabric of reality. Every boundary between every category of existence. Human and Pokemon. Physical and psychic. Self and other. It's all one system, and it's all failing. Can you rebuild it? Not from here. I need to be in it. Inside the seal structure. Inside the tear. She looked at the rip in reality above them. The darkness pouring through it was intensifying, the dissolution spreading faster. And the primordial will resist. It will try to dissolve me, my identity, my consciousness. Everything that makes me me. If I lose myself in there, you won't. Ash, you cannot know that. I know you. He took her face in his hands, the way he had on the broken street after Kalen's first attack, palms on lavender skin, thumbs brushing the luminescent lines beneath her eyes. I know who you are. Not what you were made to be. Not what anyone designed you for. Who you are. Mira. The woman who held a dying creature so it wouldn't be alone. Who tried to make soup and achieved nuclear fusion. Who slept for the first time because someone told her she was safe. That's who you are. And that's who's going up there. And that's who's coming back. Her eyes glistened. The tears were still a new experience for her, each one a small surprise, a reminder that she was more human than anyone had intended. If I do not come back, you're coming back. If I do not, Mira. His voice was quiet and absolute. You're coming back. Because I'll be right here. And you promised you'd stay. She kissed him. Hard, desperate, pouring everything she had into it, every moment of watching him from the shadows, every year of loneliness, every night of never sleeping, every instant of the new, terrifying, extraordinary experience of being known and chosen and loved. The bond between them blazed, psychic energy and human emotion and something beyond both fusing into a connection so deep it had no name in any language. When she pulled back, her eyes were clear. The fear was still there, but it was contained now, held in check by something stronger. I'm coming back, she said. She rose into the air. The golden blade pulsed in her hand, its light intensifying as she channeled her psychic energy through it, transforming divine authority into something that was hers, not the rigid, separating force of Arceus's original design, but something new. Something that carried within it the fundamental truth of her existence, that two different things could connect without destroying each other. That boundaries could be permeable without being meaningless. That love, real, chosen, earned, was not the violation of natural order but its highest expression. She entered the tear. The primordial hit her like an ocean. Not physically, existentially. It pressed against every boundary that defined her, the boundary between her body and the void, between her thoughts and formlessness, between Mira and nothing. It whispered, in a voice that wasn't a voice, that boundaries were illusions. That separation was pain. That she could let go, let it all go, and dissolve into something vast and peaceful and free of the constant, exhausting work of being a self. It was seductive. More seductive than she'd expected. Because it wasn't wrong, not entirely. Boundaries were painful. Being a self was exhausting. The loneliness of individuality, the vulnerability of caring, the terror of loving someone you could lose, these were real costs of being a distinct, separate being. The primordial offered freedom from all of it. Mira faltered. Far below, in the plaza, Ash felt her waver. Through the bond, stretched thin by the distance between reality and whatever space the tear opened into, he felt the pull. The temptation. The ancient, patient invitation to stop trying. He closed his eyes. He couldn't fight the primordial. He couldn't follow her into the tear. He couldn't do anything physical, anything tactical, anything that his years of training had prepared him for. All he could do was be himself. Completely, clearly, without reservation. And let the bond carry that to her. He thought about her. Not the power, not the fear, not the cosmic stakes. Her. The way she said adequate when she meant, I love this. The way she monitored his heart rate because she couldn't stop herself from caring about every beat. The way she'd looked at chocolate for the first time. The way she tried to make soup and almost melted the pot. The way she'd said his name, Ash, with a crack in her voice that contained everything she'd never learned to say. He thought about who she was. Not Mewtwo. Not Subject M2, Prime. Not a weapon or a key or a lock. Mira. The person who looked outward. The person who chose. The bond blazed. Inside the tear, Mira felt it. A warmth at her center that the primordial's cold couldn't reach. Not power, identity. The crystal-clear knowledge of who she was, reflected back to her through the mind of someone who saw her without flinching and loved what he saw. She was Mira. She was a person who had been made but had chosen what to become. She was connected, to Ash, to the world, to the painful and beautiful and exhausting experience of being alive and individual and part of something larger than herself without being consumed by it. That was the answer. That had always been the answer. She raised the golden blade and sang. Not with her voice, with her whole being. Every frequency of psychic energy she possessed, every wavelength of divine authority the blade contained, every ounce of the love that burned through the bond and kept her anchored to herself. She sang the song of boundaries, not the old song of separation, of walls and divisions and things kept apart. A new song. A song of connection. Of membranes instead of walls. Of bridges instead of chasms. Of two things, human and Pokemon, self and other, one and many, touching without merging, connecting without collapsing, loving without dissolving. The primordial screamed. Not in pain, in frustration. Because the new seal wasn't fighting it. Wasn't pushing it back through force. It was redefining the terms. The old seal had said, these things must be separate, always, forever. The primordial had spent eternities pushing against that absolutism, finding cracks, exploiting the fundamental impossibility of total separation in a universe built on connection. The new seal said, these things are different, and their difference is beautiful, and they can touch without losing themselves. There were no cracks to exploit in that. No rigid walls to undermine. Just a truth, woven into the fabric of reality, that was as flexible as it was strong. The tear began to close. Not slamming shut, healing. The edges of the rip drew together like skin over a wound, the darkness receding, the dissolution reversing. Buildings that had begun to soften resolidified. Colors returned. The distinction between sky and ground, between one moment and the next, reasserted itself with a gentleness that belied the cosmic forces at work. The primordial withdrew. Not defeated, it couldn't be defeated, any more than you could defeat the concept of entropy. But contained. Resealed. Held in check by a barrier that was stronger than the original because it was built on truth instead of denial. Mira fell. The golden blade shattered in her hands, its purpose fulfilled, its authority expended. The divine light dispersed into the air like embers. She dropped from the closing tear, her energy spent, her consciousness flickering, her body limp. She fell like something with no ability to fly, which is what she was in that moment, a woman, exhausted and empty, who had just rebuilt the fabric of reality and had nothing left. Ash caught her. Not with psychic power. Not with a Pokemon. With his arms. Charizard had brought him into the air the moment he'd seen her start to fall, and he timed the interception with the same instinct that let him read a battle 3 moves ahead. He caught her against his chest, and Charizard's wings beat hard, carrying them both down to the plaza in a controlled descent that was considerably less graceful than it was determined. They landed hard. Ash's knees buckled. He went down, Mira in his arms, and he didn't care about the impact or the bruises or the crowd of trainers and civilians and emergency responders who had materialized around the plaza. Mira. He cradled her against his chest. Her skin was cool, too cool, the bioluminescent patterns dim and irregular, her white hair limp. Her eyes were closed. She looked fragile in a way she never had before, and it terrified him more than the primordial ever could. Mira. Come on. Open your eyes. Nothing. You promised, he said. His voice cracked. You said you were coming back. You don't get to break that. You don't, her hand twitched. Fingers, long, elegant, two-jointed, lavender, curled weakly against his jacket. The same gesture she'd made the first time they'd held hands, careful and testing, as if she expected him to pull away. He didn't. Her eyes opened. Violet, deep, exhausted. They found his face with the unfocused searching of someone surfacing from a long way down. Your heart rate, she whispered, is extremely elevated. He laughed. It came out wet and rough and broken, and he didn't care, because she was talking and her hand was gripping his jacket and her eyes were finding focus and she was here. Yeah, he managed. It does that. I should monitor it. You really should. She smiled. Weak, barely there, a shadow of the expression she was still learning to make. But real. Hers. He held her on the broken pavement of a plaza in a city that was still standing because she'd chosen to stand between it and the end of everything, and around them, slowly, the world remembered how to be ordinary. The aftermath took days. Saffron City was damaged but intact. The Eastern District would need rebuilding, and the convention center would need new windows, but the structural heart of the city had held. The psychic network Mira had established, and Sabrina had maintained, had saved hundreds of lives, coordinating evacuations and defensive actions with a precision that would be studied by military strategists for years. The hybrids were a different matter. When the primordial had withdrawn, the dark energy inside Vasa's Generation 5 subjects had dissipated, not gradually, but all at once, like a puppet strings being cut. Most of them had collapsed. Some had died, their bodies, designed to channel primordial energy, unable to survive without it. Others had survived, but they were damaged, confused, their minds a tangle of programmed directives and emerging consciousness. Ash fought for them. In the Emergency League Council session that was convened 48 hours after the attack, he stood before a panel of politicians, military officials, and league executives and made his case with the data from the Sylph sublevel and the testimony of every trainer who'd fought beside him. They're people, he said. Not weapons, not assets, not threats. People. Some of them were created without consent. Some of them were tortured. All of them deserve the chance to be more than what they were made to be. Lance backed him. Sabrina backed him. Silver, to the genuine astonishment of every person in the room, backed him, standing up in his black clothes with his father's name hanging over him like a shadow and saying, in a voice that could have cut diamond, my father created Mewtwo as a weapon. He was wrong. Don't make the same mistake by treating the rest of them the same way. The motion to classify hybrids as Class 7 threats was defeated. In its place, a new resolution, hybrid beings would be recognized as sentient entities with legal protections, and a rehabilitation and integration program would be established under the joint oversight of the League, the International Police, and a new advisory council that included, at Ash's insistence, hybrid representatives. The Gardevoir hybrid from the Sylph sublevel was the first to be stabilized outside a tank. The geneticists Ash had contacted through Professor Oak had found a way to replace the nutrient fluid with a combination of psychic support and specialized medication. She'd stood on her own 2 feet for the first time in her existence, looked at the sky through real air instead of glass and fluid, and cried the way only someone who'd never known freedom could cry, with total, devastating, bewildered joy. Ash was there for it. Mira was beside him, her hand in his, her own eyes suspiciously bright. "You promised you'd come back for her," Mira said quietly. "I keep my promises." "Yes." She looked at him. "You do." Voss was taken into custody. The primordial energy in her system was being managed by a team of psychic healers working in rotation, suppressing the corruption while medical researchers searched for a way to reverse the transformation. It would take months. Maybe years. Maybe forever. Before she was transferred, Ash visited her in the medical ward. She was lying in bed, her transformed arms strapped to a specialized containment frame, her mismatched eyes staring at the ceiling. She looked smaller than he expected. Diminished. The brilliant scientist who'd stormed a city was gone, and in her place was a woman who'd woken up from a dream to find that she'd burned everything around her. "I thought I was helping," she said without looking at him. "Every step of the way. Every decision. I told myself I was making things better. I know. The hybrids in the tanks. The ones I created. They're being helped. It's going to take time, but they're going to be okay." She closed her eyes. "I can still feel it. The primordial energy. It whispers. It tells me that boundaries are prisons and identity is a cage and I should just let go. Are you going to?" "No." She opened her eyes. The human one was wet. "No. Because the woman who held me while it was tearing me apart, your Mewtwo, she showed me what it feels like to be on the other side of what I did. She showed me the truth. And the truth doesn't whisper. It screams." Ash nodded. There was nothing else to say. He left her in the care of people who would give her what she'd never given her subjects: patience, compassion, and the time to become something different. Kalen was recovering in a League medical facility, stripped of his divine power but apparently unbothered by the loss. When Ash visited, the former Arbiter was sitting up in bed, eating hospital food with the contented expression of someone who just set down a weight they'd been carrying for 4 centuries. "How does it feel?" Ash asked. "Being mortal?" Kalen chewed thoughtfully. "The food tastes better. I think divinity may have numbed my palate." "That's your takeaway from losing cosmic power?" "I've been an instrument of divine will for 400 years, Ash. I haven't tasted a good meal in longer than most civilizations have existed. Forgive me for having priorities." He set down his fork. "The seal is holding." "Mira says it's stronger than the original. The new structure is more flexible, it can adapt to changes in the boundary without cracking. Because it's built on connection rather than separation." Kalen nodded slowly. "Arceus was wiser than I understood. The old seal was always temporary, a stopgap until something better could be found. Mewtwo, Mira, was that something. Not a flaw in the system. An upgrade. You tried to capture her." "I did. And I was wrong. The mandate was clear, but the mandate was built on assumptions that were 4 millennia old. Perhaps divine will needs mortal perspective more than either side would like to admit." He looked at Ash with those calm, now entirely human eyes. "The primordial is patient. Eternity's patient. This is not the end. I know. Guard each other well. Whatever comes next, you'll face it stronger together than apart. We know that too. Kalen smiled. Then you know everything that matters. Now leave me alone. I have 4 centuries of meals to catch up on. Silver found Ash the day before he and Mira were set to leave Saffron City. They stood on the roof of the convention center, the same building where, a week ago, they'd been competitors in a tournament that now felt like it had happened in a different lifetime. The tournament's been cancelled, Silver said. Obviously. Obviously. I was going to win. You really weren't. Silver's mouth twitched. Almost a smile. The closest thing Ash had ever seen from him. Don't push it, Ketchum. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the city. The Eastern District was wrapped in scaffolding, construction crews already at work. Life continued. It always did. My father spent his whole life trying to control power, Silver said. Pokemon, people, organizations, everything was about leverage. About making sure he was the one holding the leash. He looked at his hands. I spent my whole life trying to be the opposite of that. Fighting against his legacy. Proving I wasn't him. You're not. I know that now. But not because I fought against it. He looked at Ash. Because I saw you. The way you work with your Pokemon, with Mira, with everyone. You don't hold leashes. You hold hands. And people follow you not because you control them, but because they trust you. A pause. I don't know how to do that. But I think I'd like to learn. That almost sounded like a compliment. Don't get used to it. Silver turned to leave. At the stairwell door, he stopped. The hybrid rehabilitation program needs people. People who understand the science, who have access to the original research, who know where the bodies are buried. He didn't look back. I've volunteered. Silver. What? Thank you. The longest pause yet. Then, don't make me regret it. He was gone. The night before they left, Ash and Mira sat on a hill outside the city. The same kind of hill they'd shared in the Athorn Valley, high ground, open sky, the world spread out below them in all its complicated, imperfect, surviving beauty. Mira was in her true form. Lavender skin catching the moonlight, white hair stirring in a breeze that might have been wind and might have been psychic energy and might have been the breath of a world that was still learning to hold itself together. She'd recovered from the battle slowly, her power returning in increments, her consciousness reknitting itself from the strain of reshaping reality. She was still tired. Still fragile in ways she'd never been before. But she was here. And she was Mira. Pikachu was curled in Ash's lap, asleep, his small body rising and falling with contented breaths. The electric mouse had been through as much as any of them, and he'd handled it the way he handled everything, with a steadfast, uncomplicated courage that made Ash's chest tight every time he thought about it. I've been thinking about what Kalen said, Mira said. That the primordial is patient. Yeah. It will try again. Not soon, perhaps not for centuries. But the seal, even the new one, is not permanent. Nothing is permanent. No. And when it tries again, it will need to be met. Not with the same response, the seal will need to be different each time, adapted to whatever the primordial has learned. Are you saying we need to do this forever? She was quiet for a moment. Then, I am saying that as long as there is a boundary between human and Pokemon, between self and other, there will be a force that seeks to dissolve it. And as long as that force exists, there will need to be a bridge. A being who embodies both sides. A connection strong enough to prove that the boundary doesn't mean isolation. You. Us. She looked at him. The moonlight turned her violet eyes to silver. The bond is not mine alone. It is ours. What I did inside the tear, reshaping the seal, I could not have done it without you. Not because of your power. Because of yourself. Your clarity. Your stubborn, infuriating, beautiful insistence on being Ash Ketchum regardless of what the universe throws at you. You say, stubborn, like it's a bad thing. It is frequently a bad thing. A pause. But not always. They sat in the quiet. The city glowed below them. Above, the stars were out, more of them than usual, or maybe just brighter, the sky itself seeming to celebrate the fact that it still existed and still had room for small, beautiful points of light. I was created to be a weapon, Mira said. Her voice was soft, reflective, without the pain that had always accompanied this statement before. A key. A lock. A subject. An asset. She listed the words like old clothes she was folding and putting away. You are the first being who ever asked me what I wanted to be. Ash looked at her. At the lavender skin and violet eyes and white hair, the impossible beauty of a being who existed on the boundary between two worlds and had chosen to belong to both. At the woman who tried to make soup and achieved nuclear fusion. Who'd fought a god and won. Who'd learned to sleep, and cry, and smile, and love, in the space of a week and a lifetime and no time at all. So, he asked. What do you want to be? She was quiet for a long time. The bioluminescent patterns beneath her skin pulsed in slow, steady rhythms, calm, settled, home. Yours, she said. Then, quieter, with a wonder that suggested she was hearing the word for the first time even as it left her lips, and mine. For the first time, mine. He put his arm around her. She leaned into him, her head finding the hollow of his shoulder, and the bond between them hummed with a warmth that had nothing to do with psychic energy and everything to do with two people, improbable, impossible, undeniable, who had found each other in a world that had tried very hard to keep them apart. He kissed her forehead. She closed her eyes. Pikachu chirped in his sleep, paws twitching. Somewhere far away, under a mountain, beneath a seal that was new and strong and built on love instead of fear, something ancient shifted in its sleep. It would wait. It was good at waiting. It had waited before the world had a name, and it would wait after the last star burned out. But tonight, it dreamed. And in its dreams, it saw a light, violet and gold, warm and steady, shining from a hill where a man and a woman sat together under stars, and it knew, with the patient, grudging awareness of something that had been outmaneuvered by the smallest and most powerful force in any universe, that this light would not go out easily. It settled deeper. The dream went on. The hill was quiet. And the world, fragile, miraculous, stubbornly unfinished, kept turning. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.